before thunder had a name, before the first sunrise broke the veil of nothingness, there was a whisper. That whisper became a woman, Rhea, the mother of gods, the queen of lost time. In a world not yet ruled by Olympus, she stood between love and destiny. Her husband, Cronus, devoured their children one by one to outpace a prophecy. And still Rhea stayed. She waited. She learned that silence could be sharper than any blade. Tonight, you and I return to that silence, to an age where mountains breathed, oceans dreamed, and the gods were still unsure of what it meant to exist. Within that quiet, one choice would bend eternity. The moment a mother hid her final child and deceived time itself. But if eternity asked for your children, how far would you go to outsmart it? Before there were gods, there was nothing. No sound, no breath, no up or down, only the endless, humming potential of chaos, the yawning void. Imagine drifting through it, weightless, thoughtless, surrounded by neither light nor dark, a universe asleep, waiting to dream itself awake. And then a pulse. From the emptiness stirred Gaia, the earth herself, the first mother. Her skin became mountains, her sighs turned to wind, her tears to rivers. From her body rose Uranus, the sky, vast and glittering. A canopy of stars stretched above her form. When sky first met earth, the silence cracked open like an egg. From their union spilled life, rivers of gold light, sparks of consciousness. Out of this sacred joining came the Titans, 12 radiant beings shaped from the meeting of permanence and possibility. They were the first gods not yet burdened by worship, only by wonder. Among them, one shone with a gentler fire. Rhea, whose name meant flow, moved like the rhythm of the sea. She carried the calm between storms, the balance between giving and keeping. The poets of later ages would call her the mother of gods. But here, in this newborn world, she was still only a daughter, watching the first sunrise through eyes that had never known time. Uranus, her father, feared what he had made. For every new Titan born, the world grew louder, fuller, less his own. So he pressed his children deep into Gaia's belly, locking them away in the dark beneath the earth. Gaia's cries echoed through the world, the first sound of pain ever heard. Rhea listened. She did not yet understand rebellion, but she felt its first heartbeat inside her chest. To her, the earth's sorrow was a call unanswered, a rhythm interrupted. Gaia, desperate and wise, forged a blade from stone and whispered to her youngest son, Cronus, "End your father's reign, set us free." Rhea watched the sky tremble as Cronus lifted the sickle. With one strike, the old order bled. Uranus fell, and from his wounds spilled both horror and renewal. The birth of Furies, giants, and Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty itself. The silence of creation was broken forever. Yet even as the world began to breathe, a prophecy was born within the dying sky. Uranus, defeated, warned his son, "You too will be overthrown by your own blood." And though Cronus laughed, Rhea saw the shadow in his smile. The same fear that once ruled their father. A new era began. The Titans rose to power, carving rivers, raising mountains, teaching the stars to move in harmony. To mortals who would come much later, this would be remembered as the Golden Age, a time when the world itself seemed young and kind. But the seed of fear had already been planted, and fear, even in a god, grows. Rhea wandered through meadows of light, where flowers never wilted and oceans glowed with silver fire. She saw how life multiplied, creatures of stone, water, and thought. Still, her heart lingered on her mother's sorrow and her father's curse. Could the world stay pure if power always feared its heir? When she closed her eyes, she felt time move differently. Not as a line, but as a circle, always returning to its beginning. Perhaps that is why she would later become its mother. She understood the rhythm of endings that birth beginnings. Far beneath the mountains, the imprisoned spirits of Gaia's first children murmured like thunder in sleep. They spoke of balance, of debt, of the inevitability of change. And though Rhea did not yet know it, their voices were the future calling to her. The whisper that would one day guide her through betrayal and loss. As the first twilight fell across the newborn earth, Rhea stood between her parents' realms. Sky above, soil below, and breathed. It was the first act of choice, the first moment of awareness that something divine could feel. And somewhere in that breath, the fate of all gods began. But peace is a fragile dream. For when a father locks away his children, what becomes of a mother's patience? From the deep hush of Gaia's sorrow came movement, slow, deliberate, eternal. The earth turned beneath the heavens, and from her, life began to multiply. The Titans, once hidden, now walked freely across mountains and seas, shaping the first world as though sculpting memory itself. They were 12, 6 brothers, 6 sisters, each a fragment of something larger, born of sky and soil, light and shadow. They moved with the calm grace of elements, their footsteps echoing across time. Oceanus, the endless sea, wrapped the world in his arms. Hyperion, radiant and proud, kindled the first sunlight. Thea, his consort, taught the light to shimmer like gold upon water. Themis, wise and solemn, carried within her the seed of justice. And among them all was Rhea, gentle yet unyielding, a tide that could carve mountains with patience alone. Rhea's laughter was said to bring spring to the world. Her presence softened the wildness of her kin. Where her touch lingered, flowers opened and rivers curved gracefully around stone. The poets would one day call her the flowing one, not for her movement, but for her heart. A heart that never held bitterness for long, only continuity. But perfection is a mirror that always cracks. Uranus, the father they had overthrown, had left behind more than a curse. He had left the memory of fear, that subtle suspicion that power is never truly safe. And within the heart of Cronus, Rhea's brother, that fear began to breathe. Cronus was the youngest of the 6 brothers, clever, charming, adored by all. He spoke with the smooth voice of command, and when he looked at Rhea, the air seemed to still. For a time, she saw in him what the world itself longed for: balance, order, protection. He ruled the heavens beside her, his scythe buried in the earth, the symbol of tyranny turned into a sign of new order. Under their rule, the Golden Age truly began. Mortals had not yet been born, but spirits wandered free, and the earth sang in unbroken harmony. There was no hunger, no death, no need for prayer, only gratitude. Even the stars seemed to move to Rhea's rhythm, slow and certain, as though guided by her unseen hand. Yet, as the centuries turned, Rhea began to notice a stillness behind her husband's smile. Cronus often stood atop Mount Othrys, gazing into the horizon, muttering to himself as if speaking to shadows. When she asked what haunted him, he would answer with soft dismissal, "Nothing, my queen. The world is quiet. I intend to keep it that way, but silence can hide many storms." Cronus had heard his father's prophecy whispered again and again, that one of his own children would rise against him, just as he had risen against Uranus. The thought rooted deep in his divine heart, twisting his love into caution, then into paranoia. Rhea saw the change but could not yet name it. She felt distance where there had been warmth, a shadow where there was once light. When they walked together through the fields of gold, she could feel the weight of destiny pressing against her husband's every word. One evening, as the heavens turned silver, Rhea approached her mother, Gaia. The earth, ancient and wise, stirred beneath her feet. "Mother," Rhea whispered, "we have everything the world could desire: light, peace, beauty. Why does his heart tremble in the dark?" Gaia's voice rose from the soil like wind through leaves. "Because prophecy is not a curse, my child. It is a mirror. Your brother sees his reflection in the fate he gave his father, and he fears himself." Rhea fell silent. For the first time, she felt pity for Cronus, not as a tyrant to come, but as a soul too aware of his own design. Still, she hoped love could soften fear. She believed that kindness could outlast prophecy. And so, when Cronus came to her with words of devotion, promising eternity beside him, she accepted. Their union was celebrated by all creation. Rivers glittered brighter, the stars aligned in perfect harmony. The gods themselves seemed to hum in approval. It was said that even time paused for a moment, watching the first divine marriage with reverence. But beneath the music of that eternal wedding, destiny was already sharpening its teeth. When the vows were spoken, the earth trembled slightly, not in joy, but in warning. A breeze passed through the valley like a sigh that only Rhea heard. It carried her mother's quiet lament. Even love must answer to time. Rhea brushed it aside, thinking it only the echo of old wounds. Yet in her dreams, she began to see strange images. A cradle, a hand, a mouth that devoured light. Each morning she awoke with her heart racing, as if she'd glimpsed a truth she wasn't meant to know. Still, the days of the Golden Age continued in beauty. Rhea ruled beside Cronus, offering compassion where he offered control. Together they governed the elements: fire, sea, wind, and stone. The seasons turned in perfect rhythm, a symphony of creation composed by their union. To the cosmos, they seemed unshakable. But within Rhea, a question lingered like a shadow at dusk. Can peace truly exist when fear is part of the foundation? Her question would soon be answered, in a way that would break the heavens open once more. For prophecies, like rivers, always find their way back to the sea. And though Rhea's heart was pure, destiny had already chosen its path. Elsewhere, in the quiet corners of eternity, the seeds of new life were stirring, and with them, the first whispers of betrayal. What happens, she would soon learn, when a father locks away his children. What becomes of a mother's patience when love is tested by fear? The sky had been silent for too long. After the fall of Uranus, the heavens seemed to hold their breath, suspended between peace and unease. The Titans had inherited creation, but none understood how heavy a crown truly was. Cronus, youngest and boldest among them, wore it as if born to do so. His voice carried the certainty of a god who believed himself invincible. In him, Rhea saw order made flesh, a ruler who could turn chaos into calm. Yet, as the centuries unspooled, that calm began to sound less like harmony and more like control. He had promised her a world free of fear, yet he had inherited its echo. For every act of creation, there was a shadow, a whisper that something might one day take it away. And so, even as he ruled with golden hands, Cronus began to close them. The Titans built their throne upon Mount Othries, a fortress of marble and stormlight. From there, they ruled the heavens and the earth below, their power so vast that even the stars bowed in their paths. The oceans obeyed Oceanus, the dawn bent to Hyperion, the seasons answered Themis. And at the center of it all, Rhea, the queen whose grace kept the cosmos in rhythm. But within the palace of the Titans, harmony trembled on its edge. Rhea saw how her husband's eyes lingered on the horizon, searching for something unseen. At night, he spoke in fragments of fate, of rebellion, of the cycle that could never be broken. When she asked him why he feared his own bloodline, Cronus would smile, but his words were the kind that chilled the air around them. "Do you not see, my love?" he said. "Power devours itself. As I was born from Uranus, so too will another rise from me. That is the way of things." Rhea reached for his hand, but he did not feel her touch. His gaze was fixed on the dark horizon, where time itself seemed to whisper his name. For all his strength, Cronus was haunted by the wound of prophecy. He could not unhear his father's dying curse. He could not forget the look in Uranus's eyes, that terrible calm of a god who had already seen his own fate unfold. And so, he vowed that his children would never grow old enough to defy him. Still, before the cruelty came the beauty. For a time, their love was real, or at least it felt so. The world blossomed under their union. The seas shimmered with silver fire. Mountains rose like sleeping giants, and forests stretched endlessly across the horizon. The sun and moon began their eternal dance, their rhythm echoing the pulse of Rhea's heart. It was said that even time bowed before their reign. But deep beneath the earth, Gaia stirred once more. She could sense the weight of destiny coiling again. Another storm forming from the very balance her children had tried to preserve. She spoke to Rhea in dreams. "Beware the crown that fears its heir. The seed of tyranny grows from the soil of fear. Rhea awoke from those dreams with her heart heavy, her thoughts circling endlessly. She still loved her husband, the god who had once freed her from darkness, but she felt the slow tightening of a chain neither of them could see. And then came the birth of their first child. When Hestia was born, light filled the palace, a warmth no fire could match. Rhea held the infant close, her heart overflowing with awe, but Cronus stood apart, silent, studying the child not as a father might, but as a king inspects a rival. Rhea's smile faltered. "She is ours," she whispered, "ours to protect." Cronus nodded slowly, almost kindly. Then, without warning, he reached out and swallowed the newborn whole. The world itself seemed to stop breathing. Rhea's scream echoed through the marble halls, through the valleys below, through the very bones of the earth. Cronus turned to her, his face calm, his voice even. "It must be done," he said. "Fate cannot strike what does not live to see it." Rhea fell to her knees. Her hands trembled as she touched the empty cradle. The fire of love in her heart flickered, not extinguished, but altered forever. That night, she fled into the fields beneath the starlit sky, her cries muffled by the wind. Gaia's voice met her there, soft and ancient. "My daughter," the earth said, "the cycle has begun again." Rhea pressed her palms into the soil, trembling. "Then let me break it." But Gaia did not answer. The earth only sighed, a mother mourning her own reflection. In the years that followed, the pattern repeated. Each child Rhea bore, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, was swallowed by Cronus the moment it drew breath. No cradle ever stayed full. No song of birth ever ended in laughter. And still Rhea endured. She wept not from weakness, but from a patience so deep it touched eternity. For she knew that the seed of hope, once planted, never truly dies. At times, she would wander to the edges of the sea, whispering to the waves the names of the children she could no longer hold. The ocean answered her with gentleness, as if carrying those names to some hidden place, where even time could not erase them. Cronus ruled on, proud and blind, believing he had defeated prophecy. But he mistook silence for safety, and grief for surrender. In truth, something ancient was awakening within Rhea, not wrath, but clarity. She began to see the world as her mother once had, not as a battle between love and fear, but as a cycle waiting to be rewritten. And when she felt the first stirrings of another life within her, a sixth child, she knew that this birth would not end in sorrow. This time she would not cry. This time she would act. But can one outsmart time itself? Or does every act of rebellion simply become the prophecy it tries to escape? The age that followed was known to mortals as the Golden Age. But for Rhea, it was the slow turning of a gilded cage. Cronus sat upon his throne of marble and lightning, the king of Titans, ruler of heaven and earth. Around him, rivers shimmered, trees bore fruit unending, and the stars moved in perfect obedience. It was an age without death, without hunger, without war, and yet, beneath that still perfection, a quiet wrongness pulsed like a heartbeat too slow to hear. Rhea moved through the palace like a ghost bound in silk. Every hall whispered of loss. The air itself seemed to hum with the memory of her children, their laughter that had never been, their cries that had been silenced too soon. And yet, to the world beyond, she was the picture of divine grace, the mother of plenty, the queen of the Golden Age. The poets of later ages would call her serene. But serenity is often the final form of heartbreak. When Cronus looked at her, he saw not a wife, but a prophecy, living, breathing, waiting. He loved her in the way a ruler loves a secret he cannot destroy. In his heart, affection wrestled endlessly with fear, and in hers, love decayed into pity. Still, the world adored them. Their reign was one of order and abundance. Titans and lesser deities bowed to their rule. Rivers stayed their course. Mountains remained unmoved. Even time itself seemed to hesitate before flowing forward. Mortals, when they finally appeared, would one day speak of this age as paradise, a time when the gods themselves walked among fields of gold and light. But Rhea knew the truth. Paradise built on silence is only the prelude to storm. Sometimes, when the sky was soft with dawn, she would walk to the edge of the clouds and look down at the sleeping world below. She would whisper to the wind the names of the children she had lost: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. Names that only the sea could remember. The world answered in echoes. The mountains rumbled like distant drums. Even the stars seemed to shimmer with sympathy. It was during one such dawn that Gaia came to her once again. The earth trembled softly under Rhea's feet, and from the tremor rose her mother's voice. Ancient, patient, infinite. "Daughter," Gaia said, "the wheel has turned once more. Will you let it crush you as it crushed me?" Rhea closed her eyes. "He fears the prophecy. Then give him something else to fear." Rhea opened her eyes to the sunrise. For the first time in centuries, she felt something like resolve. It was gentle, but it was not fragile. It was the strength of the tide, soft enough to soothe, strong enough to erode stone. Days passed, and Rhea moved carefully. She spoke to Cronus with tenderness, never revealing the weight of her thoughts. She learned his routines, when he watched the heavens, when he dreamed, when his fears spoke louder than reason. She began to see him not as a god, but as a pattern, predictable, rhythmic, bound by his own design. And she, the goddess of flow, would learn how to move between those rhythms. Then, one evening, she felt it again, the unmistakable pulse of life stirring within her. Another child, the sixth, a secret heartbeat beneath her own. The palace seemed to grow warmer. The air glowed with the faint shimmer of divinity yet unborn. But to Rhea it was more than a child. It was a chance, perhaps the last one she would ever be given, to break the chain that bound every mother before her. Cronus, however, felt only dread. His dreams turned dark. He began to see visions, his throne cracking, his name fading, a thunderbolt striking his crown. He awoke each night in cold fear, whispering to the air, "It will not be this child. I will not be undone." Rhea pretended not to hear, but in her heart, she was already planning. When the time of birth drew near, she retreated to the slopes of Mount Ida in Crete, far from Othries, far from Cronus's sight. There, beneath the boughs of ancient cypress trees, she called upon Gaia once more. The earth answered, parting to reveal a cavern that glowed with soft blue fire. Within it, Rhea could feel the pulse of the world itself, ancient, rhythmic, maternal. "This," Gaia whispered, "is where the cycle may change." And there, in the hidden cradle of the earth, Rhea gave birth to her final child, a son. The air trembled as he entered the world. His cry echoed like thunder inside the mountain, pure and piercing, as though even the elements paused to listen. Rhea looked upon him and felt both wonder and terror. The prophecy had returned, wrapped in innocence. She named him Zeus. Holding him close, she felt the warmth of his heartbeat, small, steady, divine. For the first time, she smiled not as a queen, but as a mother. Yet she knew that joy could not stay. Cronus would come. He always did. So Rhea acted quickly. She called upon the mountain spirits, the nymphs and the Curetes, warriors whose dance could drown the cries of infants. She gave them her blessing and her command. Guard him. Keep him hidden from the eyes of time itself. Then, with a trembling hand, she took a stone, smooth, cold, roughly the size of a newborn, and wrapped it in swaddling cloth. Her tears fell upon it like rain as she whispered to her son, "Forgive me. To save you, I must deceive the world." When Cronus arrived, she met him with composure. Her eyes were calm, her voice steady. She offered him the bundle, the false child, and watched as he swallowed it whole. The sound was sickening, final, but Cronus smiled, believing himself safe once more. Rhea turned away before he could see the truth in her eyes. She walked out into the open air, where the stars still shone as they always had. But now, for the first time, she felt something beyond sorrow, something like power. Behind her, The palace glowed with false peace. Ahead, the mountain hummed with new life. And within that hidden cave, a child's heartbeat began to echo, faint, yet unstoppable. Time, it seemed, had just met its match. The mountain slept beneath a silver moon, and the world above it did not yet know that destiny had just been rewritten. Far from Cronus's throne, in the sacred cave of Crete, Rhea held her infant son in her arms. The child's eyes flickered with light too ancient for mortal sight. Not the glow of a god yet grown, but the spark of something the world itself had been waiting for. Zeus, a name that would one day summon thunder and silence kings. But for now it was only a whisper in the dark, a promise wrapped in cloth and tears. Rhea sat beside the soft glow of the cave's heart fire, watching her newborn breathe. Each breath seemed to calm the world outside. The waves grew gentle, the winds slowed. It was as if nature itself recognized him, the child who would one day lead it. Outside, the Curetes stood guard. Armored dancers, born of Gaia's will. They struck their shields together in rhythmic fury. Their clashing echoes drowned the infant's cries. Their dance was chaos turned to music, deception turned to devotion. To the distant ears of Cronus, it sounded only like storm. And so, the deception held. Meanwhile, Rhea returned to the Titan court. The stone wrapped in cloth had been swallowed. Cronus believed the prophecy silenced once again. He sat upon his throne, confident that eternity belonged to him. But eternity is a trickster. It bends quietly while pretending to obey. Rhea played her role flawlessly. Her face remained serene, her voice calm. She spoke of peace, of harmony, of the eternal rule of the Titans. Yet beneath the mask of her queenly stillness, she carried a mother's rebellion, one that had already begun to reshape the cosmos. In secret, she would journey back to Crete whenever the night was long and the stars unguarded. She would kneel beside her hidden son and whisper stories of his siblings, of Hestia's warmth, Demeter's gentleness, Hera's strength, Hades's depth, Poseidon's wild laughter. She spoke their names not as laments, but as seeds, so that one day, when Zeus was grown, those names would bloom again into life. The nymphs who raised him, Adrastea, Ida, and the goat Amalthea, adored him. They fed him honey and milk, cradled him in their arms, and taught him to listen to the heartbeat of the world. Each time he laughed, flowers opened in the cracks of stone. Each time he cried, the mountain trembled. Rhea often watched from afar, unseen. She marveled at his growing strength. How even as a child, he could summon storms that played gently in his hands. How the air itself seemed to bend toward him in recognition. And yet she feared. Every heartbeat, every echo of thunder, was a risk. Cronus could hear. Cronus could feel. Back in his marble halls, Cronus began to dream again. Dreams of a child not swallowed, a voice not silenced. He would wake in cold fury, pacing before the fire, muttering to himself, "It cannot be. I devoured fate itself." Rhea would watch him from the shadows, her expression unreadable. "You have nothing to fear," she'd say softly, her tone a careful balance of truth and lie. For years the charade held. The world aged under Cronus's golden rule. The Titans celebrated their victories, blind to the shift beneath their feet. The air of eternity grew thin, stretched by secrets that could no longer stay hidden forever. In Crete, Zeus grew strong, a child no longer. His laughter rolled like distant thunder. His strength frightened even the Curetes, who whispered that he might one day tear the mountain open. But Rhea knew he would do more than that. He would tear open the very fabric of fate. On her last visit to the cave, she found him standing at the mouth of the cavern, staring into the night sky. "Mother," he said softly, though he had never been taught the word. The nymphs swore he simply knew her by presence, as if every god could sense the heart that bore them. Rhea stepped into the moonlight. The air shimmered around her, soft with power and grief. She placed her hands upon his shoulders. "You must go," she whispered. "The time of hiding is ending. But remember, power means nothing without mercy." He nodded, though he did not yet understand. His gaze turned to the heavens, where stars burned like watchful eyes. "And father?" he asked. Rhea's silence was answer enough. The world seemed to pause between breaths. Far away, in the halls of the Titans, Cronus stirred uneasily. His dreams grew louder. He saw lightning without storm, a hand reaching toward his throne. He woke, trembling, the first time in eternity a god had known fear. Rhea felt it too. She knew the wheel was turning again. Every age must break for another to begin. And so she returned once more to Othries. Her steps were steady, her gaze calm. To the other Titans, she was the picture of composure. To herself, she was a storm hidden inside silence. Cronus looked upon her that night and saw nothing amiss. "You seem lighter, my queen," he said, voice almost tender. "As if a burden has lifted." Rhea smiled faintly. Perhaps it has. But her mind was already elsewhere. In a cave lit by blue fire, in a world still too young to understand the price of destiny. She thought of her son, of his strength and innocence, of the truth that even gods cannot escape the things they sow. For years, she had lived between grief and hope, between silence and rebellion. Now, for the first time, she felt the balance shift. A mother had outwitted time, yet even victories born of love carry the taste of sorrow. Rhea knew what awaited her when her son's truth finally broke the sky open. The war, the chaos, the loss that always follows freedom. But as she stood in the soft glow of dawn, she allowed herself one moment of peace. She closed her eyes and whispered to the winds, "Grow, my child. Grow strong enough to break the cage I could not." And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. Not in anger, but in promise. The Titans still danced above the world, believing their reign eternal. But the air had changed. The prophecy they thought buried was stirring again. And when prophecy awakens, no god sleeps easily. How long, she wondered, before the truth would return to the halls of heaven? How long before the king who devoured fate would taste it once more? Night settled over Mount Othries like a slow exhale. The torches of the Titan court burned low, their flames bending under the weight of a silence no one could name. And somewhere within that stillness, Rhea began her final deception. For years she had hidden Zeus in Crete, feeding Cronus a lie made of cloth and stone. Yet lies, even divine ones, age. Sooner or later they begin to breathe. The king of time was restless again. His dreams came sharper now, visions of a child he had never seen, of thunder coiling in the belly of the earth. Each morning he awoke sweating. Each night he searched the shadows for betrayal. Rhea felt the tremor in him long before he spoke of it. "My queen," Cronus said one dawn, voice carved from suspicion. "Why do I still feel a pulse the stars will not name?" She smiled, serene, the way only someone who carries unbearable truth can smile. "Perhaps you feel your own," she said softly. He did not laugh. When he turned away, Rhea's mask cracked for the first time in centuries. Her heart raced, but her resolve held. The time for sorrow had ended. The time for preparation had begun. Far across the sea, Zeus had become a force of nature. Under the care of the nymphs Adrastea and Ida, and the gentle goat Amalthea, he had grown tall, his eyes bright as newborn lightning. He learned to listen to wind and rock, to speak the quiet language of rain. When storms gathered over the Aegean, they bent unconsciously toward Crete, drawn by something they could not name. The Curetes still danced, their shields clashing to disguise every echo. Yet even their rhythm could not mask the god he was becoming. Rhea visited him in secret, stepping through folds of mist where the mountain opened to her alone. Each time she saw him, she felt the ache of both victory and loss. Every inch he grew was another inch further from her arms, and another heartbeat closer to destiny. She told him stories of the world above, of the sun chariot by Hyperion, of rivers that sang, of his brothers and sisters sleeping in their father's darkness. Zeus listened in silence, fists clenched at his sides. "Then he swallowed them?" he finally asked. Rhea nodded. "To stop a prophecy that cannot be stopped." He looked toward the mouth of the cave where thunder gathered like thought. Then he swallowed his own end. Back upon Othries, Cronus grew desperate to quiet his unease. He summoned oracles, He watched the constellations, he measured omens in the flight of birds. But every sign returned the same message. A son born in shadow will unmake the father of light. To all others he appeared calm, yet Rhea saw the fractures forming. His temper shortened. His nights stretched endless. Fear, once whispered, had become the ruler behind the throne. Rhea knew the hour was near. She sought Gaia once more, kneeling upon soil damp with eternity. "Mother," she said, "the lie cannot hold forever. What must I do?" The earth shuddered, slow and deep. "Let truth eat fear," Gaia answered. "Let what was swallowed be born again." Rhea understood. The child she had saved would soon face the father who devoured all. But to awaken the prophecy fully, Zeus would need knowledge and allies. One storm-filled night, she returned to Crete with offerings of gold and myrrh. The cave glowed as if it recognized her grief. Zeus awaited her, no longer a boy. His shoulders bore the weight of thunder. His eyes mirrored the storm itself. "My time hiding is over," he said quietly. "Is it not?" Rhea touched his face, memorizing the lines that had once been soft with infancy. "You will go to him," she said, "but not as a son. Go as silence goes before the storm, harmless to those who do not listen." He bowed his head. "And when I stand before him, remember mercy," she whispered. "For power without mercy is only another cage." Rhea handed him a small vial, glimmering faintly in the dim light. "When the moment comes, pour this into his cup. What he has swallowed will rise again." Zeus studied the potion. "Will he die?" "No," she said. "He will awaken." And then she smiled. A quiet, heartbreaking thing. "The world changes not through cruelty, my son, but through return." Days later, a traveler arrived at Mount Othrys. Cloaked, humble, carrying nothing but a staff and a knowing silence. None recognized him. Cronus, bored of perfection, allowed the stranger into his hall. "What name do you carry?" the Titan King asked. The stranger bowed. "One unworthy of remembrance. I seek only to serve your cup." Cronus, ever drawn to flattery, handed him the goblet of ambrosia. "Then serve," he commanded. Zeus poured the potion into the drink, his hand steady as stone. The scent rose, sweet, familiar, ancient, the smell of beginnings. Cronus lifted the goblet and drank deep. First nothing. Then the air thickened. The torches flickered blue. A sound, low and terrible, rose from deep within the Titan's chest, a rumble like the cracking of mountains. He fell to his knees, clutching his stomach as waves of light poured from his mouth. From that light came shapes, 5 of them, each shining, whole, reborn. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. The children he thought forever gone. Rhea, standing at the threshold of the hall, watched as they emerged, grown, furious, radiant. Her tears fell not in sorrow but in awe. The cycle had turned again, but this time through love, not hatred. Cronus gasped, the taste of eternity bitter on his tongue. "What have you done?" he roared. Rhea met his gaze calmly. "I kept my promise," she said. "A mother never loses her children." Behind her, lightning cracked. The stranger's disguise fell away. Zeus stood revealed, the storm made flesh. Cronus staggered backward, the prophecy fully awake at last. The hall shook, the heavens trembled. The age of Titans was breaking. Far beneath the chaos, in the quiet of the mountain cave, the swaddled stone that had once deceived time lay half-buried in dust. Wind whispered across it, like laughter older than the world. The lie that saved creation had turned to legend, and legend soon would become war. For every secret kept, there comes a reckoning. And for every father who devours the future, there comes a child who will make him swallow truth instead. The storm that followed the breaking of Cronus was not heard by mortals. It lived between heartbeats of the gods. Lightning stitched the heavens together, and the air itself seemed to gasp. When the echoes settled, the world stood divided. Old against new, father against son, silence against thunder. far from that trembling sky, the cave on Mount Ida remained unchanged. The fire at its center still glowed the color of moonlight through water. The stone that had once fooled a king rested untouched, half buried in sand. A monument to deception turned salvation. The mountain breathed softly, as though remembering every cry, every lullaby, every secret ever whispered within its walls. Rhea returned there in the first quiet after the upheaval. She came not as a queen, but as a mother searching for what remained of peace. The Kurites greeted her with bowed heads, their armor dulled from years of dance and duty. They said nothing. They had learned that reverence speaks better in silence. She walked deeper into the cavern until she reached the chamber where Zeus had once slept. The walls still hummed faintly with his laughter, the echoes of a childhood the world had never witnessed. She ran her fingers across the stone, tracing the tiny cracks left by his first storms. "You were never meant to hide forever," she whispered. The air carried her words outward. They became part of the cave's endless refrain. Outside, clouds gathered, not in rage but in rhythm. Zeus, now revealed, had begun his march. The sky itself shifted with him, thunder answering thought, wind bending to will. Yet even as the newborn ruler of gods prepared for war, Rhea felt both pride and dread. She had saved him to fulfill the prophecy, but prophecy is a creature that never truly belongs to the one who births it. She knelt before the old altar. In the stillness she could hear the faintest echoes of those who had helped her. The nymphs, the goat Amalthea, the spirits who had hidden her son. "You kept him safe," she said. "Now keep his heart." A soft sound answered, like hooves upon stone. A breeze wound through the cave, carrying the scent of honey and earth. For a moment, Rhea almost believed the mountain was breathing with her. Elsewhere, the Titan King raged. Cronus's roar rippled across creation, shattering the calm of the Golden Age. Oceans rose in fear. Stars flickered. He called upon his brethren, the mighty Titans, to stand with him against the upstart child who had dared to unbind time. Atlas, Iapetus, Ceus, and Crius answered, their eyes burning with the loyalty of habit more than faith. They remembered Rhea's kindness but obeyed Cronus's command. Such is the nature of old gods. They cling to what has already ended. From her cave, Rhea heard their summons echo through the world. It was not sound that reached her but memory, each note a reminder of what she had once called family. The cave trembled. Dust drifted like ash. Even the stalactites seemed to weep. Gaia's voice rose again, distant yet near. The child you saved will unmake and remake. Stand firm in the space between. Rhea pressed her palms to the ground. If war must come, she said, let it cleanse, not consume. The earth gave no answer. Only another heartbeat, slow and deep, reminding her that all cycles require loss. Zeus descended to her before battle, the air bright with stormlight. For a moment, the cave that had sheltered his infancy now seemed too small for him. He knelt, eyes still young though power pulsed beneath them. Mother, he said, the Titans gather. I can feel their anger, yet part of me hesitates. He is still my father. Rhea studied him. In his face she saw all 6 of her children. Hestia's gentleness, Demeter's resolve, Hera's pride, Hades' quiet, Poseidon's depth, and her own unbroken calm. Do not fight to destroy, she said. Fight to free. Even Cronus was once a son bound by fear. End the fear, not the bloodline. Zeus bowed his head. And when it ends? Then listen, she replied. The world will tell you what kind of king you must become. Thunder murmured approval. He rose, kissed her brow, and left in a streak of light that turned night to day. The cave shuddered under the passing of destiny. Rhea stayed kneeling long after he was gone. The shadows grew long, and the stone's hum deepened into a single tone, low, steady, eternal. She realized it was her own heartbeat echoing back at her. Perhaps that was the cave's secret. Every sound it caught, it returned transformed into memory. When dawn came, she stepped outside. The sky above Crete blazed gold and silver, torn between storm and sunrise. Far across the horizon, she saw flashes of lightning, the first strokes of the war to come. The air vibrated with 1,000 possibilities. Behind her, the cave whispered one last time, carrying every sound it had ever held. The cries of newborn gods, the clash of shields, the sigh of a mother choosing defiance. The echoes twined together until they became indistinguishable from the wind. Rhea looked back only once. "Guard this place," she said to the mountain. "Let no memory die ungiven." Then she turned toward the horizon. The war of heavens had begun, and her children would need her silence as surely as they had once needed her song. The cave grew still again. Only the faint dripping of water remained, each drop striking stone in perfect rhythm. Tick after tick, the sound of time itself restarting. The echoes would never fade. They would travel through centuries, retelling the story to any who listened closely enough. For every age has its cave of echoes, every heart, a chamber where old love and old defiance continue to speak. And in that echo lay a question that even gods could not silence. When power is born from protection, what becomes of love once the battle begins? The sky above Mount Othries burned the color of copper. Clouds hung low and swollen with lightning that refused to fall. Inside the Titan hall, torches guttered though no wind stirred. Even fire seemed uncertain which side to serve. The feast of Cronus had begun, though no one present felt hunger. He had ordered the celebration to prove that his throne remained unshaken. Platters of ambrosia lined the tables. Rivers of honey and wine poured endlessly from golden urns. Music filled the vast chamber, flutes, drums, the clang of silver goblets. But behind every note, Rhea heard it, the tremor of fear hiding beneath forced joy. Cronus raised his cup. "To eternity," he said. His smile gleamed like a blade. The Titans cheered, but their voices cracked. Even Atlas, towering and proud, could not meet his king's eyes for long. They all remembered the prophecy now fulfilled in whispers, the son who had forced the swallowed gods back into the world. Rhea sat beside him, her expression unreadable. To the watching court she appeared serene, the eternal queen who had never spoken against her husband. Only the smallest movement, her fingers tightening around the stem of her chalice, betrayed the storm inside her. The hall's music faltered. Cronus noticed. "Play!" he thundered, and the musicians obeyed, trembling. Yet nothing could drown the tension. The air felt heavy, expectant, as if the universe itself leaned closer to listen. Rhea glanced toward the far doors. She half expected to see a flicker of lightning there, a sun's arrival announced by storm. But no, Zeus had vanished into the clouds days ago, gathering allies. Tonight's silence was the last calm before the heavens tore. Cronus leaned toward her. "You seem distant, wife." "I am watching the end of a song," she replied softly. He frowned. "The golden age does not end. I have ensured it." Rhea's voice was almost tender. All ages believe that, until they hear the first echo of the next. He stared at her, searching for meaning, but she offered none. She only lifted her cup and drank. Far above, in the unseen sky, thunder rippled, faint but distinct. The Titans stiffened. Cronus's eyes darted upward. For the briefest moment, fear cracked his mask. "A storm," he muttered. "At my feast." Rhea smiled. Even storms must eat. The hall erupted in nervous laughter, though no one dared meet her gaze. Outside, the wind began to circle the mountain, carried the scent of rain and something else, change, sharp and electric. Cronus rose from his throne, the sickle of Uranus hanging above him as a relic. He lifted his arms to calm the trembling court. "Do you forget who rules the heavens?" he boomed. "Let thunder come. It bends to me." But as he spoke, the torches flickered out one by one. Darkness pooled around the tables. From that darkness came a low rumble that was not thunder but the grinding of stone. The palace itself seemed to shift, foundations moaning as if alive. Cronus called for his guards. None moved. Fear had rooted them. Only Rhea stood, her silhouette calm against the dim firelight. "You feel it, don't you?" she said quietly. The wheel turning, the age you built beginning to creak beneath its own weight. He snarled. You would speak prophecy to me? No, she said. I have spoken enough. I am only here to listen. Outside, the first bolt of lightning split the clouds. It struck the sea, and the sea answered with a wave so vast it kissed the stars. Zeus had come. The storm he carried was not wrath but renewal, the breaking of one rhythm to begin another. Rhea watched the flash reflect in Cronus's goblet. He comes, she whispered, and the words were neither threat nor hope. They were fact. Cronus turned toward the doors. Then let him learn what eternity tastes like. He raised his sickle. Its edge gleamed with the light of the first stars ever born. Around him, the Titans formed ranks, their bodies vast as mountains. Atlas lifted his spear. Ceus summoned fire from his veins. The feast became an army. Rhea stepped back. She had no weapon, only the memory of her children's cries and the steady faith that love could outlast fear. She whispered a single word to the empty air, perhaps to Gaia, perhaps to time itself. Let it balance. The doors burst open. A rush of wind flooded the hall, scattering torches, tearing banners from their hooks. In the doorway stood Zeus, his figure wreathed in light, his eyes carrying the calm before thunder. Behind him came the freed Olympians, each radiant, each unafraid. Cronus's roar shook the mountain. The sickle fell in an arc of silver fire, but Zeus met it with lightning. The sound was the birth of storm itself. Stones split, pillars cracked. The Titans reeled as the sky invaded their hall. Rhea did not move. She stood amid the chaos, her hair whipped by wind, her gaze fixed on the meeting of father and son. Around her, Titans fell, thunder rolled, but in her mind there was only stillness, the stillness that comes when the world's balance resets. Hours, or perhaps centuries, passed within that storm. When the light finally dimmed, the great hall lay in ruins. Cronus knelt among the shattered marble, the sickle broken beside him. Zeus stood above him, chest heaving, lightning fading from his hands. Rhea approached slowly. She looked upon her husband, no longer a king, merely a tired god clutching at the remnants of time. You could have been more, she said, not in anger but sorrow. You could have trusted what you feared. Cronus closed his eyes. And you could have warned me. I did, she said gently. You never learned to listen. Zeus turned to her, waiting for command, but Rhea shook her head. This victory is not mine, nor yours. It belongs to the rhythm that guides us all. She knelt and touched the floor. Beneath the rubble she felt the pulse of the earth. Steady, forgiving. The storm had ended, yet its echo would shape every age that followed. Cronus was taken away, bound not by chains but by inevitability, to the depths of Tartarus where fallen time sleeps. The Titans who survived scattered to distant horizons, their names destined to fade into legend. And the hall of Othries grew silent again. Rhea lingered a moment longer. On the table before her lay the remains of the feast, golden cups overturned, fruit bruised, wine dark as blood. She lifted one goblet, poured its contents onto the floor, and whispered, "For what was, for what must be." Then she walked out into the dawn. The sky was still trembling, but light had returned. Behind her, in the ruined hall, only echoes remained. The laughter of gods who had mistaken fear for order, the whisper of a queen who had waited long enough. And as she stepped down the mountain, Rhea asked the question that would linger across centuries of myth. When power feeds upon itself, who will dare to taste hope again? When the storm finally broke, the world exhaled. Mountains still smoked from the clash of father and son. Rivers glowed faintly with the residue of divine fire. The age of Titans had ended, but the new age stood silent, unsure whether to rejoice or to grieve. Rhea walked among the ruins of Othries as one might walk through memory. Shattered columns jutted from the earth like bones. The scent of ash clung to everything, yet beneath it she could smell renewal. Rain on stone, life forcing its way through cracks. She understood. Endings were only the deep breath before rebirth. In that silence, A single step echoed behind her. She turned. Zeus stood at the threshold, no longer the hidden child of Crete, but the ruler of the heavens. The lightning that once roared in his veins now shimmered quietly around him, a crown of living light. His face carried both youth and exhaustion, the strange calm of a victor who knows war changes even the one who wins. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Rhea crossed the broken floor and placed her hand against his chest. "So the prophecy breathes," she said. "It breathes," he answered, voice low, almost human. "But it does not rest." She studied him. "Do you hear it already, the weight that follows power?" Zeus nodded. "The world feels louder now. Every wind calls my name. Every shadow listens." Rhea smiled faintly. "That is rule, my son. Not glory, but listening." Outside, the sky had cleared to a pale gold. The surviving titans had scattered. Some fled into the ocean's depth, others to the farthest mountains. Atlas alone remained, punished to bear the heavens upon his shoulders, a reminder that no strength escapes consequence. Zeus watched them go with a mixture of pity and relief. "They were mighty once," he murmured. "They still are," Rhea replied. "Might does not die, it only changes hands. Remember that before you call yourself king." He turned to her. "I do not wish to become him." "Then do not fear what you love," she said simply. "Fear made your father devour the future. Let love make you serve it." Her words lingered like incense in the ruined hall. Zeus lowered his gaze. "And you? What becomes of the mother when the sun becomes the storm?" Rhea looked toward the horizon, where light touched the sea. "Mothers do not vanish, child. We become the rhythm that keeps your thunder from breaking the sky apart." Days passed. The world adjusted to its new pulse. The Olympians, his brothers and sisters reborn, gathered beside him on Mount Ida, where the last clouds of war still curled like smoke. Hestia brought fire to warm their gathering. Demeter coaxed shoots of grain from the scarred earth. Poseidon stirred the seas into life again. Even Hera, proud and sharp, stood silent in respect for the peace none had ever known. Rhea watched them with a mixture of awe and ache. To see her children together, alive, was joy beyond language. Yet each face reminded her of centuries stolen, of lullabies never sung. She said nothing. Some victories demand silence to stay sacred. One evening, as the first stars returned, Zeus approached her. "The world needs order," he said. "The sky, the sea, the underworld, each must have its realm. And you will divide it?" "I will ask," he corrected. "Not command." Rhea's lips curved. "Good. A ruler who begins with asking will end with gratitude, not rebellion." He looked eastward. "Still I feel him, Cronus. Even bound in Tartarus, his echo remains. It calls in my dreams." She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Then listen not with fear but with understanding. The echo is not a curse. It is warning. Every throne repeats the one before it. You must learn to break the sound without silencing the song." Zeus closed his eyes. For a heartbeat, the wind softened around them, carrying the scent of olive and rain. When he opened them again, a gentler light filled his gaze, one that spoke not only of thunder but of dawn. Soon he would climb higher beyond Ida, beyond Othries, to a peak the world had not yet named. There he would build Olympus, the house of a new order. But before he left, he turned once more to Rhea. "I could not have done this without you," he said. She shook her head. "You could not have done it without being me." Every mother lives inside her children's choices. He frowned, half smiling. "Then if I fail? Then I will fail with you," she said. "And the earth will grow wise enough to try again." Zeus reached for her hand, but she was already stepping back, the edges of her form softening against the dawn. "Go," she told him. "The world waits for the sound of its next heartbeat." Lightning flared once, not in violence but in blessing. When the light faded, Rhea stood alone among the ruins. The wind shifted. The broken stones of Othries glimmered faintly, as though remembering. She turned her gaze downward, to the mortal lands beginning to awaken. Tiny sparks of humanity stirred. Fragile, curious, destined one day to tell these stories in their own voices. They would build temples and name mountains, paint myths on pottery, whisper prayers to the gods above, never knowing how much of their world began with a mother's quiet act of defiance. Rhea smiled. The sound of waves reached her ears, the same rhythm that had once lulled Zeus to sleep. She breathed deeply, letting the world's new balance settle into her bones. The prophecy had ended. The cycle had turned. Yet the circle of love remained unbroken. Time itself seemed to pause, listening for her final thought. A thought that would drift through centuries, finding any who dared to nurture hope in secret. "Let each generation unbind the one before," she whispered. "That is how eternity learns to breathe." The wind carried her words up the mountain, toward the gathering gods, and down again into the roots of the earth. Somewhere in the depths of Tartarus, even Cronus heard them and understood, too late, but truly. And on that understanding the world found its first peace. The sky was raw from lightning, the sea a single sheet of restless silver. Cronus, bound but unbroken, crouched in the ruins of his hall and felt something stirring in the pit of his being. An ache that was not pain but memory. He tried to swallow against it, but the past has teeth. Zeus stood before him, thunder dimmed now to a steady glow. Behind the sun came the others, the children once devoured, reborn through storm. Their eyes burned with the clarity of beings who have seen the inside of oblivion and returned. For the first time since creation, time itself looked small. "Drink," Zeus said, offering a cup that shimmered with the same light Rhea had given him in secret years ago. His voice was calm, almost kind. "This is not poison. It is return." Cronus stared at the cup as though it contained the horizon. He felt the weight of prophecy tightening around his throat. To refuse would be to fight destiny itself. To drink would be to face it, and still pride twitched in his fingers. "Do you think mercy will make me less a god?" he asked. "Mercy makes you remember," Zeus answered. "That is what you feared most." Cronus lifted the goblet. The liquid shimmered like liquid dawn. He drank. A tremor ran through the mountain. The air thickened, every gust a groan of rebirth. Then it began, the retching of eternity. From the Titan's mouth poured not bile but light. It spilled across the floor, blinding, and from that brilliance stepped 5 divine figures, whole and radiant. Hestia, flame of home, her gaze steady as hearthlight. Demeter, green and gold, carrying the scent of wheat after rain. Hera, proud as the peak of Olympos. Hades, dark calm of the underworld's gate. Poseidon, the restless pulse of every tide. Each emerged grown, unafraid, their bodies formed from memory and will. They gasped not as newborns but as gods recalling air after centuries of silence. The mountain shuddered beneath the sound. Cronus collapsed, chest heaving. He looked up at Rhea, who had appeared behind her children like dawn behind a storm. Her expression held no triumph, only release. "You kept them alive inside you," she said. "Even fear cannot destroy what it tries to consume." He tried to speak, but no voice came, only a rasp of regret that echoed through the hollow of his ribs. Rhea touched his shoulder once, light as forgiveness, and turned away. Outside, the world brightened. Birds that had not sung since the first rebellion lifted their voices again. Rivers surged as if impatient to greet the gods newly freed. Every corner of creation seemed to whisper the same word: balance. Zeus looked upon his siblings. In them he saw not soldiers but aspects of the whole. Flame, growth, law, shadow, sea. Together they were the structure the cosmos had waited for. "Not one of us will rule alone," he said. "Each will keep the others awake." They nodded, the pact forming without need of oath. The age of single tyranny was done. The era of divided power had begun. Still, Rhea lingered in the background, unseen by most. She watched her children rediscover light and thought of the centuries lost within Cronus's belly, ages spent as dream and silence. The grief of it threatened to unmake her, but she steadied herself. They lived. That was enough. Mothers measure victory in breath, not crowns. Cronus stirred again. His voice, when it came, was hollow. "You will learn," he croaked. "The wheel does not stop. One day your own sons will stand where you stand." Zeus did not flinch. "I know," he said, "and because I know, I will listen when they whisper what you ignored." The answer disarmed even prophecy. Cronus's shoulders sagged. The sickle slipped from his grasp and vanished into dust. He closed his eyes and allowed the fates, silent daughters of night, to lead him downward into Tartarus, where the echoes of old kings go to learn humility. Rhea exhaled. The air around her lightened, as if the universe itself had unclenched. In the days that followed, the 6 siblings gathered once more on Crete, where everything had begun. They feasted not to forget but to remember. Firelight danced across stone. Wind from the sea carried laughter new to the world. No gold, no thrones, only a circle of gods beneath the stars. Rhea spoke last. "My children," she said, "what begins in fear must end in trust. Keep the rhythm. Guard it. Do not let silence become hunger again." Hestia placed a small flame in her mother's hands. "Then you will always have our warmth," she said. Rhea smiled, closing her fingers around the light. For the first time since creation, her hands did not tremble. Far off, mortals were being born, the first sparks of humanity. They would someday name this tale the Titanomachy. They would carve it in stone and whisper it to their children. But none would know how softly the world had turned, how gently a mother's defiance had tilted eternity toward compassion. When the feast ended, Zeus rose. "The war is over," he said. "But the storm is not gone. We will carry it wisely." Rhea nodded. "Then the gods have finally learned to grow." The waves struck the cliffs below like applause. The stars wheeled slowly overhead, their rhythm now steady and sure. And in that balance, the quiet after centuries of noise, the future began. So ended the long swallowing of the gods and the first tasting of freedom. The cosmos, newly awake, rested for a heartbeat between creation and remembrance. Yet within that calm another question formed, soft as thunder far away. When victory arrives through mercy, can it outlast the next storm it invites? The world had barely learned to breathe again when thunder returned. Not the cleansing thunder of birth, but the gathering sound of reckoning. Cronus had fallen, yet his defeat was not silence. It was echo. Every echo demands an answer. The titans still loyal to him rose from the far edges of creation. From the mountains of the north came Ceus and Crius. From the fiery caverns of the east, Hyperion and Iapetus. They moved like storm fronts, their bodies formed of cloud and molten stone. "The son of Rhea has stolen our sky," they cried. "Come, brothers and sisters, take it back." And so began the Titanomachy, the war in heaven. Zeus stood on the peak of Mount Olympus, which until that moment had been only another mountain. Around him gathered his siblings. Poseidon with the sea's roar in his chest, Hades cloaked in shadow, Hera fierce as dawn, Demeter calm as harvest, Hestia glowing with unshakable flame. They were new gods, but the wind already knew their names. Below, Rhea watched from the cloud's edge. She did not interfere. The time of mothers protecting children had passed. Now she would guard the rhythm itself, the fragile heartbeat between creation and destruction. The earth beneath her trembled, and Gaia whispered, "Every war is a correction." Rhea answered, "Then let it correct gently." The first strike came from the sea. Poseidon hurled his trident and split the horizon. Waves reared like beasts, crashing against the fortress of Othries. In reply, Hyperion drew down the sun itself and flung it as a spear of fire. The two forces collided mid-air, birthing a sky so bright that even gods had to shield their eyes. Hades opened the ground beneath the Titan's feet, but Ceus laughed and sealed it shut with raw time, turning the fissures into iron. Hera called down winds that could flay marble. Themis, still torn between sides, bent them away from the innocent valleys. Every element of existence became weapon and wound. Zeus waited until the 10th dawn before unleashing his full strength. From his hands poured lightning not of destruction but of decision. Bolts that split choice itself, forcing truth to the surface. Wherever they struck, the Titans saw reflections of their own fear. Power decaying into hunger, pride collapsing into ash. Some dropped their weapons. Others roared louder, unwilling to face the mirror. High above, Cronus' spirit raged within Tartarus, shaking its walls. He shouted to his old allies, but his voice was now only rumor carried by wind. The more he screamed, the smaller he became. Rhea heard it faintly and whispered, "Be still, you had your age." For 10 years the war raged. The sky became a battlefield of memories. Mountains were hurled like stones. Rivers changed their courses. Mortals, fragile sparks newly born, hid in caves, inventing the first prayers simply to name what they feared. Rhea wandered among them unseen. She guided the trembling ones toward shelter, cooled the fires where the lightning fell too close. To them she appeared as a breeze smelling faintly of pine, a voice that said, "Wait, the world is learning its balance." Many centuries later, they would carve her likeness as Cybele, the great mother who tames lions. Above, Zeus began to tire. Even thunder grows heavy when stretched across years. He turned to his grandmother Gaia and begged for counsel. She rose from the earth, vast and green, and said, "Seek the 100-handed ones. They were buried unjustly. They remember the rhythm you protect." So Zeus descended into the abyss where the Centimanes slept, Briareus, Cottus, and Gyges, each with 50 heads and 100 arms, each forgotten since the first betrayal of Uranus. "Fight for freedom," Zeus said. "Not for me." They opened their many eyes, saw truth shining behind his words, and rose. When they entered the war, the tide turned. The mountains themselves marched. Giants of stone hurled boulders the size of temples. Lightning braided through their fingers. The Titans faltered, their unity cracking under the sheer noise of change. At last, on the plain of Phlegra, the battle reached its end. The sky burned violet. The sea boiled white. Zeus raised his arm, every thunderbolt he had ever forged coiling around it. "Enough," he commanded, and the word carried the weight of every dawn yet to come. The bolt fell, not in anger but in closure. When the light faded, the Titans lay defeated. Silence returned, the kind that follows birth rather than death. Rhea descended from her cloud to stand among the wreckage. The air smelled of iron and rain. Zeus turned to her, eyes wide, not triumphant but uncertain. "It is done," he said. "Nothing is ever done," she replied. "It only changes shape." He looked toward the horizon where the defeated Titans were being led away to Tartarus. "I will not kill them," he said. "The world must remember what it overcame." Rhea touched his shoulder. "That mercy will keep the wheel turning longer this time." They stood together as the sky cleared. The clouds, once weapons, drifted apart and became soft again. Light pooled on the newborn peaks of Olympus, sanctifying them without decree. The gods would climb there soon, but for now they rested, weary and wondering. That night, as stars returned, Rhea walked alone among the ruins of Othries. In a quiet hollow she found the broken sickle of Uranus, half buried in ash. She lifted it gently, tracing its curve. So many ages of fear and prophecy had revolved around this single piece of metal. She set it into the ground, blade down, and whispered, "No more." From the earth where it stood, a small flower grew, white, trembling, resilient. The first bloom of peace. Far above, thunder rolled once, not as threat but as heartbeat. The war was over. The world, though scarred, was whole. Rhea closed her eyes and let the wind pass through her hair. "Balance restored," she murmured. "For now, because even in victory the rhythm must be tended. Even gods need reminding that heaven, once won, can be lost again." And across the cooling sky, a question drifted like the final spark of lightning. When the conqueror becomes the keeper, can thunder learn to sing instead of strike? When the last thunder faded, the sky seemed to sag with exhaustion. Smoke clung to the mountains. Rivers carried the taste of ash. The war in heaven had ended, but the echo of it kept trembling through creation. as if the world itself still feared to breathe too loudly. Zeus stood upon the scorched plateau of Phlegra where the Titans had fallen. The air shimmered with the residue of power, heat without fire, light without source. Around him his brothers and sisters waited, their faces marked by fatigue rather than triumph. No song rose. Victory in the language of gods is always quiet. Rhea arrived at dawn. She moved through the haze like memory returning to a dream. Where her feet touched, the earth cooled. The gods parted for her, instinctively recognizing something older than victory, older even than them. She looked upon her children, blood of her blood, and saw in each the same question. "What now?" "Justice," said Hera first, her voice sharp with the clarity of unfinished anger. "They rose against us. They should be unmade." "No," murmured Hestia. "Too much has been unmade already." Poseidon's trident scraped the ground. "Then what becomes of them? Let them walk the world again and sow revolt." Rhea answered before Zeus could speak. "No chain forged from fear will hold for long. Bind them not with hatred, but with remembrance. Let them see what they built and lost." Zeus turned his gaze toward the horizon where the defeated Titans lay sprawled, giants dimmed of their former glory, eyes hollow but still burning faintly with pride. He lifted his hand, and the air thickened with lightning. But this time it did not strike. Instead, the ground opened, a vast chasm coiling downward into black flame. "Tartarus," whispered Demeter, "the womb of unending night." "Not punishment," Zeus said. "Preservation." With emotion both solemn and merciful, he commanded the winds. One by one, the Titans were drawn downward, their enormous forms sinking through layers of shadow until only silence remained. Chains of light sealed the abyss, not to torture, but to remind. The storm that had birthed the new gods finally lay still. When it was over, the heavens brightened again. New constellations appeared, marks left by fallen Titans now frozen as stars. Atlas, doomed to bear the weight of the firmament, raised the sky upon his shoulders, his silhouette forever bridging heaven and earth. The balance had been restored, though no one dared call it peace. Rhea stood beside Zeus as he watched the last flicker of lightning fade into calm blue. "You have done what even prophecy feared to finish," she said. Zeus did not answer at once. "And yet," he murmured, "I feel the same hunger that ruled him. Power is loud, mother. It drowns its own warning." Rhea's eyes softened, then learned to listen beneath it. Every storm has a rhythm of stillness between strikes. Rule from there. He looked at her, at the calm that had carried ages, the patience that had outlasted chaos itself, and for the first time understood the kind of strength that never raises its voice. "You will stay with us?" he asked. "For a while," she said, "until silence forgets to be afraid." Weeks passed. The gods built anew upon the mountain that would come to bear their name. Marble halls rose from stone. Rivers were rerouted to feed sacred groves. From the ashes of Othries, the Titan's palace, Zeus lifted fragments and shaped them into Olympus, a reminder that even ruin can become foundation. Rhea walked through these beginnings unseen. She touched each pillar, each altar, blessing them not with immortality but with impermanence. "May you change," she whispered, "so you may endure." The stones seemed to breathe at her touch, colors deepening like wet clay in sunlight. Below, mortals, tiny, astonished, looked up from their valleys and saw the bright crown of Olympus piercing the clouds. They did not know its story, only that something new shimmered above them. They would call it divine, not realizing it was also born from grief. At twilight, Rhea visited the mouth of Tartarus. The abyss pulsed faintly, its heat rising like a sigh through the cracks of the earth. She knelt and laid her palm upon the stone. "Sleep," she told the imprisoned Titans. "Dream kindly. The world remembers your shape." From the depths came no answer, only the faint echo of waves of time moving again. Slow, inevitable, merciful. When she returned to Olympus, her children awaited her. Hades had already claimed the underworld as his realm, Poseidon the sea, Zeus the heavens. Demeter tended the fertile earth, Hera guarded law and lineage, and Hestia kept the fire burning at the center of all things. Each looked to Rhea not for approval but for blessing. She gave it wordlessly, touching their brows one by one. To Hestia, warmth. To Demeter, patience. To Hera, dignity. To Poseidon, temperance. To Hades, peace in solitude. And to Zeus, remembrance. Keep these, she said. For when divinity begins to forget what it means to feel, her children bowed. The wind around them brightened, carrying the first notes of harmony the world had heard since chaos. Rhea turned her gaze to the stars, where the constellations of the old gods now burned like faint lanterns. They were no longer threats but teachers, reminders that even fall is part of creation's rhythm. That night, Zeus stood beside his mother at the edge of the mountain. "You freed us," he said, "and still you carry no throne. Why?" Rhea smiled, weary and luminous. "Because thrones must always be watched from the outside. Someone has to remember what they cost." The wind caught her hair. It glittered with dust from 1,000 broken ages. "You will make mistakes," she added softly. "So will those who come after you. But do not fear the fall. Only gods who have fallen know how to rise without rage." Zeus bowed his head. The first night of the new order spread above them, vast and calm. Rhea looked once more toward the abyss where Cronus slept, and then toward the sky her son now ruled. Between them stretched the fragile thread of balance she had woven through every act of loss and love. She touched it gently, the gesture of a mother checking her child's breath in sleep. "For now," she whispered, "it holds." And as the stars wheeled silently above the newborn Olympus, one thought moved through the quiet heart of the universe. A question that would hum beneath every myth ever told. When victory becomes order and order becomes pride, who will remind heaven how to kneel? Morning crept over the world as if the sky itself were afraid to wake. The smoke of war thinned into silver mist. Mountains glistened with dew instead of ash. The age of Titans was finished, and the newborn gods stood blinking in a light that no longer burned but warmed. From that light would rise Olympus. Zeus watched the horizon turn gold. The world felt new beneath his feet, soft, untested. Behind him the mountain groaned, reshaping itself under divine hands. Each stroke of thunder carved its ridges higher. Each gust of Poseidon's breath smoothed stone into marble veins. The mountain climbed toward eternity until even clouds had to kneel around its crown. Rhea stood below, her form haloed by dawn. She had seen ages begin before, but never one that smelled so strongly of hope. The children she once hid were now architects of the sky. Yet as she gazed upward, she felt not triumph but a strange stillness, like the hush that follows a lullaby once the child has fallen asleep. From the plains came mortals, small, curious sparks newly born from clay. They watched the shining summit and whispered, "The gods dwell there." They did not know that the mother who had birthed those gods still walked among them, disguised as wind and memory. On the mountain's growing terraces, the 6 siblings built their realms. Poseidon struck the rock with his trident, and water burst forth to form cascading falls that would later feed every river on earth. Demeter pressed her hands to the soil. From it rose groves of pomegranate and olive, each leaf whispering the promise of life's return. Hera raised pillars of ivory and gold, decreeing that law and loyalty would hold the heavens together. Hestia kindled the first flame at the mountain's heart, steady, domestic, eternal, its smoke curling upward like prayer. Zeus, meanwhile, shaped the summit. With every crack of thunder, he forged a hall where cloud became marble, light became wall, and time itself slowed its breath. There he placed 12 thrones, one for each power that would rise from this new harmony. The air around the hall glowed soft amber. Even the sun seemed gentler now, orbiting in approval. When the work was finished, the siblings gathered before their mother. Zeus spoke first. "The storm has passed," he said. "Let there be peace." Rhea's gaze swept across them, proud yet distant. "Peace is not born of endings," she said. "It is born of remembering why the storm began." Her words settled like mist on the marble. None replied. Even gods learn best through silence. That night, the first feast of Olympus was held. Ambrosia shimmered in crystal bowls. Nectar flowed like honeyed wind. Yet beneath the laughter ran a quiet tension, the awareness that they were writing the first lines of an age whose echoes would outlive them all. Every gesture, every word would become pattern. Rhea sat apart, watching. Zeus lifted his cup toward her. "To the mother of gods," he proclaimed. "To she who defied time." The mountain thundered in approval. Even the stars brightened. But Rhea did not rise. She smiled instead, a gesture too gentle for triumph. "To those who learned to listen," she answered. The hall fell still for a heartbeat, then erupted once more into song. Later, when the revelry faded, she walked alone along the mountain's edge. The view below took her breath. Oceans shimmering like mirrors, valleys where mortals slept, rivers tracing silver lines across the dark earth. All of it pulsed with new rhythm, the rhythm she had fought for through centuries of silence. Still, the quiet inside her remained heavy. Immortality, she realized, was not a gift but an echo that never stops returning. To step aside was to let the song change key. Zeus found her there, framed against the starlit horizon. "You should rest," he said softly. "I will," she replied. "But not here. Olympus belongs to the rising." He hesitated. "Then where will you go?" Rhea looked toward the southern mountains, where the wind carried the scent of pine and stone, the same scent that had hidden her long ago when she saved him. "To where silence still matters," she said. "To the places that remind gods they were born from earth, not above it." Zeus bowed his head. "Then the mountain will remember you." "It already does," she whispered. "Every rumble beneath your feet is a mother's heartbeat." He smiled, but his eyes glistened with the weight of farewell. "If ever the balance falters, listen," she said. "The answer will always come as wind before storm." And then she stepped into mist. Her form dissolved into the air, her presence spreading through valleys and forests, through the quiet corners where mortals would one day build shrines to an unnamed mother. Olympus lost its queen, but the world gained its guardian breath. When dawn returned, Zeus stood alone at the summit. The air shimmered with calm. Hera approached and placed a hand on his arm. "She is gone," she said. He shook his head. "No, she is everywhere." Below, thunder rolled gently across the horizon, not in rage but as remembrance. It carried Rhea's voice, soft, unending, part lullaby, part warning. Hold the rhythm. From that morning forward, every sound of the mountain, every rumble of thunder, every sigh of wind through olive leaves, would be her language, reminding the gods what silence once sacrificed so they could speak. The day stretched bright over the new world. Olympus gleamed like a crown, its marble still damp with birth. Mortals looked up from their fields and saw light reflecting from its heights. They began to tell stories, of gods who lived above, of a mother who became the breath between storms. They carved her image into stone, though none could capture her expression. That mixture of sorrow, patience, and peace that holds entire ages in one glance. Rhea's name faded slowly from the songs of Olympus but remained in the pulse of everything living. The rivers that curved around the mountains, the lull of the sea, the rustle of leaves at dusk, all were her language, speaking quietly beneath the louder hymns to thunder and fire. And whenever lightning struck too close, mortals would whisper, "The mother is reminding the sun." Thus began the dawn of Olympus, a world rebuilt from ruin, balanced between sky and soil. The new gods believed the future was theirs. Only Rhea knew it would belong, as always, to time. And as the first rays of sunrise reached her hidden mountain far to the south, she closed her eyes and smiled, not at victory, but at continuity. Because in every age, after every storm, there must always come a dawn that remembers the silence before it. When Rhea left Olympus, the air around the mountain dimmed for a moment, as though heaven itself paused to remember the sound of her breathing. Then the wind caught her scent and carried it south, across valleys newly green, until it found the ridges where the world first learned to stand. She walked for days through silence. Each step lightened her shape, until she seemed woven from mist and memory rather than flesh. The farther she traveled from her children's thrones, the more she felt the pulse of the earth return beneath her feet. It was slower here, patient, ancient, like the rhythm of her own heart finally echoing back to her after centuries of battle. At last she reached the high peaks of Mount Dindymon, where the clouds sleep on stone. The wind there was not harsh but knowing. It circled her gently, tasting her grief. She built no palace. She needed none. The mountain itself became her temple. Its cliffs her walls, its caves her chambers, its rivers her hymns. Mortals would one day call her Meter or Rhea, the mother of mountains. To them she was both presence and absence, the hush before dawn, the echo that lingers after thunder. They could not see her clearly, but they felt her whenever the ground trembled or the air turned suddenly still. Rhea spent her days walking the ridgelines, watching the world heal from the war. She saw forests creep back across scorched plains, rivers carve new paths through softened rock. Each change soothed her, proof that even destruction can be compost for renewal. At night she lay upon the cold stone, looking up at the constellations that once had been titans. Their faint glow no longer frightened her. They seemed at peace, teaching the sky to remember humility. Sometimes Zeus's thunder rolled far away, a reminder that the heavens were still loud. Rhea would close her eyes and smile faintly. "He still listens," she would whisper, and the mountain would rumble back, amused. Visitors began to find her, drawn by instinct rather than direction. Shepherds lost in fog stumbled into clearings where a soft warmth pressed against their hearts, and the wind spoke in a woman's voice. Hunters who climbed seeking prey left their spears behind, kneeling instead before a stone that pulsed faintly with life. They brought offerings, milk, honey, simple bread. Rhea accepted nothing but their silence. In silence, she knew, reverence ripens. Seasons folded over one another. Spring sent carpets of crocus up the slopes. Winter answered with snow that glowed like sleep. Rhea watched them trade places endlessly, a conversation older than gods. She began to understand that the true throne of creation was not built of marble but of repetition, the patient cycle that requires no audience. In time, other deities sought her counsel. Themis came first, weary from judging too many quarrels. "How do you remain calm?" she asked. "When even peace demands noise." Rhea smiled. "By remembering that stillness is not absence. It is listening." Later Demeter visited, mourning the endless loss and return of her daughter. Rhea placed a hand on her shoulder. "Every descent teaches the earth how to bloom again." One by one, they left lighter than they arrived. Her mountain became not a fortress but a refuge, a heartbeat between heavens. Word of her quiet power spread among mortals. They built shrines of rough stone near mountain springs, each a doorway to gratitude. They carved lions beside her image, for she was fearless gentleness, the only strength wildness truly respects. At festivals, women danced in circles beating small drums, echoing the rhythm of the earth's core. They called her Kybal, blending her name with new tongues. Rhea smiled at the sound. Names changed, but the pulse stayed the same. She never demanded worship. She offered perspective. When storms tore villages apart, survivors heard her voice in the wind. Rebuild. The mountain does not weep when struck by lightning. It waits for the next sunrise. When kings grew arrogant, earthquakes whispered her warning. All crowns rest upon soil. Thus, even without throne or temple, she ruled through balance. One twilight, centuries after Olympus crowned itself eternal, Zeus visited. He descended alone, walking the goat paths his mother once had walked. When he reached the summit, he found her sitting beside a small fire, draped in plain wool, hair streaked with frost. For a moment he saw not a goddess but the simplicity of endurance. "You built an empire," she said without turning. "Does it breathe?" Zeus hesitated. "It rules," he said, "but sometimes I think it forgets why." Rhea threw another twig into the flame. "Then come down more often. Mountains teach even thunder to listen." He knelt beside her. "They call you Kybal now. "Do you mind?" "Why should I?" she asked. "Names are only waves. I am the tide." They sat together in silence. Below them, clouds drifted like slow rivers. Above, the stars pulsed like open eyes. When Zeus rose to leave, he bowed, not as son to mother, but as sky to earth. She accepted the gesture with a smile that carried no pride, only peace. After he vanished into the heavens, Rhea looked once more across the world. She could feel its countless heartbeats. Human, divine, animal, elemental. Each a small percussion in the endless rhythm she had guarded since creation. She realized she was no longer separate from it. She was the pulse itself. That night, mortals sleeping in distant villages dreamed of a woman walking through their fields, her hair filled with starlight, her hands scattering seeds that glowed like embers. When they woke, new flowers had bloomed where none had before. They named them Rhea for remembrance. And so the mother of gods became the goddess of mountains, neither ruler nor ghost, but the equilibrium every living thing secretly seeks. Her temples were cliffs, her prayers were echoes, her legacy was patience. Whenever storms gather and the sky shudders, she is there, deep within the bedrock, whispering to the trembling earth, "Hold firm." Even thunder passes. Night had fallen soft over the Aegean, and the sea breathed like a creature half asleep. On the island of Crete, where everything had once begun, moonlight spilled through the same forests that had hidden an infant from a god's hunger. The wind that moved through those trees carried the faint scent of goat's milk, honey, and smoke, ghosts of an age that refused to fade. Rhea returned there alone. She walked barefoot along the mountain path she had climbed centuries before, the stones cool beneath her skin. The nymphs who once guarded her secret were long gone, dissolved back into the elements they had served. Yet their laughter seemed to linger in the air. Even the Curetes, the shield-clashing warriors whose dance had drowned the cries of the infant Zeus, echoed faintly in the rhythm of the wind. Time had thinned them into memory, but memory, Rhea knew, was a kind of immortality. At the mouth of the cave, she paused. Moss draped its entrance like a curtain, and the air that flowed out was cool, humming with the low song of underground water. The firelight of the world's first rebellion still seemed to flicker there, faint but unextinguished. Rhea stepped inside. The cave had changed and yet not changed. Stalactites hung like the frozen tongues of ancient prayers. Pools of crystal water mirrored the faint light of her presence. On the floor lay the stone she had once wrapped in swaddling cloth to trick Cronus, the stone that had fooled time itself. It gleamed faintly, polished smooth by centuries of worshippers who had come to touch what they called the cradle of Zeus. Rhea knelt beside it. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she whispered, "You were my first lie and my truest act of love." Her fingers brushed the surface, and warmth answered her touch, as though the rock still remembered the heartbeat it had replaced. Above her, droplets fell from the ceiling in perfect rhythm, the slow, eternal ticking of the world's pulse. It sounded like the heartbeat she had followed all her life, the beat of creation, of loss, of return. "Mother!" The cave seemed to breathe back. She smiled. "I am listening." In the centuries since the war, mortals had transformed this cavern into a shrine. Offerings lay scattered. Small clay figures, coins, bits of bread, the ash of incense. To them, Rhea had become myth, her story blurred into that of Cybele, Gaia, even the virgin who would come in another age. Yet she felt no sadness. Names were rivers. They changed course but always found the same sea. She could feel those mortals even now, sleeping in the villages below, their dreams brushing against her like wings. They still feared the dark, still prayed for protection, still sang lullabies to their children. In their tenderness, she heard her own defiance echoing through time. The details had changed, but the essence remained. Every generation hides its hope from the jaws of something larger. Every parent finds a way to deceive despair. The thought filled her with peace deeper than silence. She moved farther into the cavern until the walls opened into a vast chamber. Torches left by priests flickered in niches of rock, casting ripples of gold across the ceiling. The air tasted of salt and iron. Here, At the cave's heart, she could feel the slow circulation of the earth itself, the same breath that had carried her son to safety. Rhea lowered herself to the ground and closed her eyes. She remembered the night of the deception. The way the air had smelled of rain and goat's fur, the tremor of fear in her hands, the desperate love that had guided her lie. She had been half mad with grief then, yet in that madness she had outwitted destiny. Now, centuries later, she realized what that moment had truly been. Not rebellion, but harmony. She had simply followed the deeper rhythm when the surface rhythm failed. The cave whispered again, softer this time, like the voice of the sea in a shell. "He remembers you." "I know," she murmured. "I feel him in every thunder." Her gaze lifted to the faint beam of moonlight that pierced the ceiling. Dust motes floated through it like slow stars. "But I am content here. Let the sky be his. The mountain still needs a heartbeat." Outside, dawn began to bleed along the horizon. Pale rose against dark water. The first mortals of the day, fishermen barefoot and weary, passed below the cave. They saw smoke rising from the entrance and thought it was a sign. One bowed and whispered a prayer. "Mother, keep the sea calm." The wind answered with a gentle hush. His boat would sail safely that day. Rhea listened. The devotion of mortals was quieter than the hymns of gods, but purer. It reminded her that the universe did not thrive on thunder. It survived on repetition, on small acts of faith repeated endlessly by trembling hands. She felt gratitude. Not the grand, burning kind the Olympians demanded, but a soft gratitude, cool and clean as spring water. Before leaving, she placed her palm flat against the stone again. "Sleep," she told it. "You've guarded enough secrets." A single tear fell onto its surface and shimmered briefly, then vanished into the grain. As she turned to go, her reflection rippled faintly in the pool beside her. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw herself as she had been, younger, crowned, radiant with divine certainty. Then the image melted back into shadow, replaced by the steady glow of the present. Barefoot, unadorned, peaceful. She smiled. This is the truer crown. Stepping out into morning, she felt sunlight wash over her face. The sea stretched endless below, each wave catching light like a memory returning home. The gulls circled high above, their cries sharp but joyful. She breathed deeply and began her descent down the mountain. Each step echoed, a quiet answer to the cave behind her. It was not farewell. Echoes never end, they only travel. As she reached the foothills, the sun cleared the horizon. Its light touched the cave mouth one last time, igniting it in gold. For a moment, it looked as though the mountain itself were smiling. And far above the sea, in the wind between waves and sky, Rhea's voice drifted once more. "Even gods are born from whispers. Remember that when the thunder fades." The cave of Crete fell silent behind her, but its echo trailed Rhea across the world. Every gust of wind that touched a mountain carried her breath. Every heartbeat in soil or sea pulsed with a memory of her defiance. And as the centuries unfolded, her story began to travel. Not as a single tale, but as a rhythm that other civilizations learned to play in their own tongues. In Egypt, she became Isis. They told of a mother who searched the ends of the earth for the pieces of her slain husband, who used tears to resurrect what time had broken. Rhea's spirit recognized herself in that persistence, the same quiet insistence that love is stronger than order. The Egyptians carved Isis holding a child against her breast, and the Nile flooded each year in answer, a pulse of life drawn from grief. To the east, in the red-stoned hills of Phrygia, she was Cybele, the great mother crowned with a turreted diadem, lions pacing at her feet. The people there beat drums until the earth itself shook, honoring the heartbeat beneath the world. They said her joy was wild, her sorrow endless, her love uncontrollable as spring. Rhea watched from the ridges above, half amused, half moved. "You have heard me," she whispered. "But remember, rhythm is not noise." Across the sea in Rome she became Magna Mater, the universal mother whose chariot thundered through festivals of renewal. Marble sculptors gave her serene eyes but carved the folds of her robe like rivers in motion, a paradox of stillness moving. Even they, masters of empire, could not help bowing before something older than conquest. Every empire, Rhea knew, eventually kneels to the womb that bore its dust. Yet beyond all these names, she remained herself, the pulse beneath the myths, the silence between hymns. She did not crave temples. She cherished continuity. Each culture added new verses, but the melody was always the same. Protection born from loss, creation surviving its own ruin. Rhea walked unseen among them. She drifted through the marble courts of Egypt, listening to priests recite hymns that once belonged to stars. She moved through Phrygian forests where devotees danced until their feet bled, seeking ecstasy in exhaustion. In their faces she saw longing, the ancient human desire to return to the moment before separation, to feel the universe breathing with them again. She would rest her hand upon their bowed heads and murmur, "You never truly left." Sometimes, when festivals grew too loud, she withdrew to the high passes where the air thinned and only hawks dared. There the world's noise dissolved. She felt the tremor of glaciers shifting, the deep moan of tectonic plates, music slower than prayer. Here, she thought, is the temple that never ends. One winter, centuries later, a young Greek poet climbed one of those passes. He carried nothing but a lyre and a question that had kept him awake since childhood. Why does the world repeat its sorrows? When he reached the summit, exhausted, he found a woman seated beside a spring, her hair streaked with snow, her eyes reflecting every age. "Who are you?" he asked. "The rhythm you keep trying to name," she replied. "Sit." He did. She taught him a single chord, 3 notes so simple they could fit inside a heartbeat. "Play this whenever you forget that endings and beginnings share a doorway." He descended, and the tune became the first lullaby sung by mothers across the Aegean. They never knew its source, but each note carried her calm. Time folded again. Rhea watched as new faiths rose, reshaping her reflection. In one, a mother cradled a divine child beneath a foreign star. In another, the earth itself was worshipped as sacred body. She did not protest. She simply moved aside to make space for new light. Every story needs the same root, she mused. Love risking itself against fear. When philosophers argued about creation, whether it was born from chaos or reason, Rhea's laughter rustled through olive branches. "It was born from care," she would whisper. "You cannot measure that. Yet even gods can feel loneliness." In the quiet between centuries, she would walk again to the ridge above Crete and listen for Zeus's thunder. Sometimes it answered, distant and dignified. Sometimes it didn't. On those nights she spoke instead to the mortals who dreamed below, lending courage to midwives, patience to farmers, music to poets. Each act, however small, became another stitch in the fabric of continuity. One evening, a mortal woman climbed the slope with her infant swaddled tight. She knelt at a small stone altar and prayed, "Mother of mothers, let my child live." The wind stirred. Rhea appeared only as warmth around them. The baby stopped crying. The mother never saw her, yet when she rose she carried peace in her eyes. Centuries later, that same story would travel under many names. Miracle, mercy, myth, but its origin was the same hand, invisible and constant. Rhea began to understand that her legacy was not a throne but an inheritance of behavior. Every mother who risked herself for her child, every act of quiet rebellion against despair, was her continuation. She did not need worship to survive. She survived by imitation. The poets felt her in metaphor, the farmers in rain, the philosophers in paradox. To each she appeared differently, but the lesson never changed. Creation is not dominance, it is endurance. She whispered this into the wind. Tell them the sacred is not distant. It is the patience to begin again. As centuries blurred into millennia, the world changed its languages, but her rhythm endured. In the clamor of cities, she became the heartbeat behind machinery. In the hush of forests, the weight beneath birdsong. Scientists would one day name it gravity, the force that pulls everything home. Rhea smiled from the dark between stars. "Call it what you will," she said. "It is still love holding matter together." And so, the Mother of Gods became the mother of meaning itself, an unseen symmetry connecting every myth that dared to name compassion divine. At the edge of dawn, standing once more upon a nameless mountain, she watched light crawl over the earth. The snow gleamed like memory. "So many faces," she murmured, "yet one heart." She closed her eyes and let the wind pass through her, scattering her presence across continents. Wherever it touched, temples breathed, mothers dreamed, and the world kept time with her silent drum, because even forgotten, she was still being remembered. Wind swept across the high ridges of Phrygia, carrying the low roll of distant drums. They sounded like thunder slowed to a heartbeat, steady, primal, impossible to ignore. Below, in the valleys, thousands gathered among the pine forests, their torches flickering against stone altars carved with lions. To them, this was the festival of Kybele, the Great Mother. To Rhea, listening from the mountain shadows above, it was her own voice returning to her through the ages. The rhythm of the drums matched the rhythm of the earth beneath her feet. Boom, pause, boom, pause. The same pattern she had felt the first time she pressed her hand against her pregnant belly, the same cadence that echoed in every storm her son ever summoned. Time, it seemed, had only translated her heartbeat into music. At the center of the festival, dancers whirled in circles. Their garments dyed crimson, their movements half wild, half reverent. The lions carved beside the altar gleamed in torchlight, eyes bright with centuries of meaning. They were not mere beasts. They were symbols, the guardians of balance, creatures both ferocious and obedient, reflections of Rhea herself. She remembered the first pair that had come to her in the mountains long ago, the ones she had tamed with a glance. They had followed her everywhere after that, embodiments of passion ruled by patience. She whispered to the wind, "You remembered well." Drums swelled louder. The air trembled. In the ritual's frenzy, one could almost mistake chaos for worship, but Rhea knew better. Beneath every wild motion lay an ancient discipline, the body echoing the earth's pulse, surrendering to something older than control. These mortals, without realizing it, were imitating the rhythm of creation itself. As the fire roared higher, a priestess stepped forward, her face painted with ochre and ash. She lifted a lion's pelt above her head and cried, "The mother endures!" The crowd repeated the phrase, each voice layering into a wave that rippled through the forest. For a heartbeat, Rhea felt herself multiply, thousands of hearts beating in sync, thousands of throats calling her name under different skies. It was not vanity that moved her. It was awe, the same awe she had felt when she first watched life take shape inside her, when she realized that creation was not command but continuity. She closed her eyes and listened to the harmony beneath the noise, the faint hum of sap in the trees, the slow breathing of the mountain, the crackle of fire eating air. The drums were simply translation. What they called worship was the universe keeping time. Later, when the crowds dispersed, Rhea descended quietly to the empty altar. The ground was littered with petals and bits of bread. She placed her palm upon the stone and felt the leftover warmth of devotion seep into her skin. "Lions," she murmured. "Drums, fire." Still the same story, only retold in louder tongues. Behind her, two real lions emerged from the dark forest, their eyes glinting amber in the dying firelight. They moved toward her with the cautious reverence of creatures who recognized their origin. Rhea smiled. "You've not forgotten, then?" One lay at her feet. The other pressed its head gently against her side. She rested her hand on its mane, feeling its steady pulse beneath her palm. "You remind them that strength is not noise," she whispered. "You remind me." The lions purred softly, the sound deep and resonant, blending perfectly with the fading thrum of the drums. In that harmony, Rhea heard her own story summarized without words. Discipline within wildness, love within fear, control without cruelty. Through the following days, she wandered among the people of Phrygia disguised as a traveler. They spoke of the mother with both devotion and dread. Some claimed she lived in the roar of storms. Others believed she guarded every childbirth, guiding new souls into the world. A sculptor told her, "I carve her always with lions and drums because they are opposites. Noise and silence, motion and stillness. And yet together they make balance." Rhea looked at him with quiet amusement. "Then you already understand her." He smiled without realizing who he spoke to. "No one ever does. She is the heartbeat we live inside." Rhea left him a small blessing, a sense of peace that would never fully leave his workshop. Every statue he made afterward carried that calm. Seasons passed. The festival repeated each spring, the rhythm of drums returning like migrating birds. Sometimes Rhea watched from afar. Sometimes she joined, unseen, moving with the dancers. The beat anchored her, reminding her that eternity, despite its vastness, was built on small loops of renewal. One evening, as dusk painted the sky purple, she climbed again to the mountain's summit. Her lions followed. Below, the drums began their first pulse of the night. She raised her hands to the wind and felt the vibration spread through her bones. For the first time, she joined the rhythm aloud. Her voice was low, resonant, half thunder, half lullaby. The earth responded. A soft tremor rippled through the ground, harmless but certain, like the planet nodding in agreement. Trees bent slightly toward her. Even the stars seemed to blink in rhythm. And in that moment, Rhea understood what her symbols truly meant. The lion was not ferocity. It was courage mastered, the roar restrained into dignity. The drum was not chaos. It was order given sound, the measure that keeps life from unraveling. Together they formed the grammar of creation, power bound by compassion. She realized why mortals had chosen those emblems to represent her. They were teaching themselves what she had learned through centuries of silence. How to live fiercely but gently, how to protect without possession, how to create without devouring. Rhea sat upon the rock, one lion on either side. "You see," she whispered to the wind, "they remember the lesson better than gods." The lions blinked, their amber eyes catching the firelight of the setting sun. The drums below reached their final crescendo before dissolving into quiet. The last echo faded into the forest, leaving only the rhythmic purr of her companions and the whisper of grass. Night fell fully. Rhea lifted her gaze to the stars. Each one shimmered like a drumbeat made of light, thousands of tiny pulses keeping the universe alive. "You've turned my heart into a constellation," she said softly. "That's all any story wants, to keep beating somewhere, long after the body is gone." She leaned back against the rock, the lions curling close. In the darkness, her breathing aligned perfectly with theirs, three patterns merging into one steady rhythm. Boom, pause, boom, pause. The same rhythm that began the world. The same rhythm that would end it. And far below, the people of Phrygia felt the tremor in their sleep and smiled without knowing why. Somewhere deep in their dreaming hearts, the Great Mother still drummed, reminding them that balance, once found, is never truly lost. Dawn crept through a veil of mist over the Anatolian hills. The air carried the smell of rain on limestone and the faint ring of distant bells. A sound so soft it might have been memory itself. Beneath those hills slept the secret shrines of Rhea, carved into stone when men still feared to raise their voices above the wind. They called them the hidden temples because they were not built to be found. No grand pillars, no golden altars, only narrow tunnels that led into chambers where silence was the offering. The people who came here did not petition the mother for victory or riches. They came to unburden themselves of noise. Every footstep down the worn stair was an act of surrender. Rhea moved unseen among them. She walked the same corridors she had walked when the world was young. Only now her presence was diffuse, half-breath, half-thought. The walls whispered her story through cracks filled with moss and dripping water. Each droplet that fell echoed as if the cave were repeating her heartbeat. Slow, patient, eternal. At the entrance of one such temple, a young priest tended the flame that never died. He had never seen the goddess, but he felt her everywhere, in the cool touch of stone, in the pulse that trembled through the ground after storms. To him, The flame was not just fire, it was remembrance. "She listens," he would tell the pilgrims, "but only when we stop speaking." That morning, an old woman came, walking with a limp. She carried no offering, only a handful of soil wrapped in cloth. "For my son," she whispered to the priest. "He is gone to war." The boy nodded, guiding her to the inner chamber. There she knelt, spread the soil upon the floor, and wept without sound. The flame flickered once, as if breathing with her, and the air grew warmer. Rhea stood unseen beside her, placing an invisible hand upon her shoulder. The woman's sobs slowed. Peace seeped into the chamber like water into sand. When she rose to leave, the soil she had brought was damp, soaked not with tears, but with the condensation of divine breath. "The mountain answered," she said, not realizing that the mountain was the answer. Far above, archeans of wind and rain sculpted the cliffs into new shapes. From certain angles, travelers could see the outline of a woman's face etched across the stone. Her eyes closed, lips curved in calm repose. Locals said it was coincidence. The pilgrims knew better. They called it the Sleeping Mother, and whenever thunder rolled through the valley, it sounded like her slow breathing. Rhea cherished these quiet shrines more than any golden temple Olympus ever built. They reminded her that divinity was not in grandeur but in presence. Here, the smallest gestures became sacred. A child lighting a candle, a farmer laying an olive branch on a rock, a lost traveler whispering thanks into darkness. Each act renewed the covenant between creator and creation, the promise that the world would continue, not because of power, but because of care. Centuries passed, and new empires rose above these caves. Stone cities bloomed and withered. Conquerors renamed the valleys. New gods arrived draped in marble and rhetoric. Yet still, beneath the shifting soil, the hidden temples endured. Even when forgotten, they hummed softly, a pulse beneath civilization's heartbeat. One empire tried to erase them. The new priests declared the mother an outdated myth, her worship too wild, too feminine, too close to the earth. They sealed the entrances, buried the icons, built fortresses over sacred ground. But you cannot bury rhythm. The soldiers who guarded those fortresses began dreaming of drums in their sleep. The wind still moaned through cracks in the stone, shaping the syllables of her name. And when earthquakes came, the temples were the only structures left unbroken. The conquerors left. The mountain remained. Rhea watched it all with quiet amusement. She had learned that resistance was not defiance but endurance. "Let them build," she whispered to the wind. "Even walls remember their mothers." From time to time, a curious traveler would stumble upon one of the old entrances. A shepherd seeking shade, a scholar chasing rumors. They would descend with torches, hearts quickening at the scent of damp stone and forgotten incense. The deeper they went, the stronger the echo became, a slow, rhythmic hum rising from nowhere. Those who listened closely said it sounded like distant thunder, or the beating of a vast heart. None of them knew they were hearing the earth remembering her. In one temple near the town of Pessinus, a mosaic still gleamed intact despite centuries of neglect. It showed a woman crowned with towers, seated upon a lion, holding a small drum. Beneath her feet ran an inscription, worn almost illegible. "She who is both silence and sound." Archaeologists would one day debate its meaning, but the villagers already understood. They said that when storms gathered above the valley, the mosaic glowed faintly in the torchlight, as if the goddess were waking to remind them that balance still lived beneath chaos. Rhea often lingered there, invisible beside the flickering tiles. She traced the lines of her own likeness and smiled. "They made me out of memory," she murmured. "And memory is stronger than marble." As centuries turned, the hidden temples began to speak again. Springs opened near their entrances. Flowers once thought extinct bloomed along their paths. Travelers returned with stories of hearing whispers while resting in the caves, soft voices offering comfort, guiding them home through storms. The scholars scoffed, but the farmers believed. They started leaving small gifts again, fruit, water, songs. Rhea accepted every offering not as tribute, but as conversation. Each act of faith, however simple, reminded her that even in a world of noise and empire, quiet worship would always find its way back underground. She thought of her son, high on Olympus, ruling lightning and law. "You speak in thunder," she said to the air. "I answer in echo. Together we keep the balance." One evening, as dusk descended over the valley, the young priest, the same boy who had once tended the flame, returned now as an old man. His hair was white, his steps slow. He carried the last ember from the sacred fire cupped in his hands. "For you," he whispered, "so the dark will not forget the light." Rhea appeared behind him as a shimmer of warmth. "You have done well," she said, her voice like wind through cedar. "But the dark never forgets. It is where the light learns patience." The man smiled, recognizing her not with sight but with certainty. "Then my work is done." "It never is," she replied gently. "But rest anyway." He set the ember down. The flame flickered once and steadied. When dawn came, the villagers found the temple open again, filled with soft golden light, though no one could say who had kindled it. And so the hidden temples endured, half in legend, half in stone, breathing proof that reverence need not be loud to be eternal. Every time a mountain hummed before rain, or a cave echoed the sea's rhythm, or a tired soul found peace in silence, the mother was there, alive in the spaces between sound. Because divinity, she had learned, was not the act of being seen. It was the grace of remaining present when no one is looking. The wind over the mountains shifted again, soft and circular, as though tracing a pattern older than motion itself. In that breath between night and dawn, Rhea felt it, the slow, patient pulse of the world renewing. It was a rhythm she knew by heart, because she had lived it in every age, in every ending, in every beginning. Time was turning its wheel once more. She sat beside a spring at the mountain's base, her reflection trembling in the water. Each ripple stretched outward, breaking her image into dozens of fragments before returning to stillness. So this is what eternity looks like, she thought. Not a straight line, but a circle of selves, each dissolving into the next. Behind her, the forest stirred awake. Birds called from unseen branches, and somewhere, far off, thunder grumbled. A low, familiar greeting from the sun who ruled the sky. Rhea smiled. "You still announce yourself too loudly," she murmured to the horizon. But there was affection in her voice, not rebuke. Her fingers brushed the water again, and visions bloomed across its surface. The first dawn breaking over chaos, Cronus swallowing the children of prophecy, Zeus reborn in defiance, Olympus crowned in cloud, all of it looping endlessly, like a song that could never be forgotten because it was written into existence itself. And beneath every image, she saw one truth repeating: nothing born escapes the cycle, not even gods. When mortals first named time, they drew it as a river, forever flowing forward. But Rhea had seen too much to believe that. Time, she knew, was not a river. It was a tide. It returned. It reclaimed. It restored. In her solitude, she often watched generations of humankind rise, fade, and rise again. Cities bloomed like spring flowers and fell to dust, only to bloom again on the same soil centuries later. Names changed. Rituals shifted. Languages forgot her syllables, but the pattern endured. Children still cried with the same hunger. Lovers still reached for one another beneath the same stars. And every heartbeat still echoed the ancient rhythm she had guarded since the first dawn. "Everything that ends," she whispered to the wind, "is merely waiting to begin differently." The mountain hummed in agreement. Pebbles rolled softly down its slopes, tiny reminders that even stone is always in motion. At night, when the sky darkened to indigo glass, Rhea watched constellations drift overhead, each one a story frozen in light. Among them burned the faint shape of a lion, its stars trembling like the golden drums of Phrygia. Another cluster shimmered in a spiral, the cradle where she had hidden her son. Even the heavens, she realized, obeyed her pattern. Stars too were born, burned, and reborn. Yet she felt no pride in that permanence. Only awe, the kind that silences gods as easily as mortals. Once, she had believed her purpose was to end the cruelty of time, to outwit fate, to stop the cycle. But now she saw its necessity. Without decay, creation would rot from stillness. Without endings, love would never learn to begin again. Even Cronus, in his devouring fear, had served the rhythm unwittingly. His hunger had made rebellion necessary, and rebellion had made renewal possible. Rhea laughed softly, the sound echoing like a lullaby. "You were not the enemy, old one," she said to the wind that carried his name. "You were the turn of the wheel." From the valley below, she heard a cry, sharp, piercing, unmistakably human. A child had been born. The sound climbed through the dawn air and wrapped itself around her like incense. Rhea closed her eyes, feeling the vibration of it travel into the earth, through the roots, into the mountain's heart. For one breath, she felt everything alive. The mother clutching her newborn, the soil trembling with seed, the ocean curling into tide, the stars pulsing like slow heartbeats. Each was part of the same sentence, the one that began when the universe first said yes. "This is why we endure," she whispered, "because something always dares to cry again." Her tears fell into the spring, joining the endless circle of water rising, falling, and rising once more. The ripples spread outward and vanished into calm. Years passed like minutes to her. Seasons folded in and out of themselves. Rhea watched mortals name their months and measure their lives by suns and moons. They built calendars to predict the world's turning, never realizing they were tracing her body's rhythm, the slow inhale and exhale of creation. She found it endearing. "You wish to count eternity," she mused, "but eternity is the act of counting itself." Sometimes she would step quietly among them, cloaked as an old woman or a wandering priestess. She would whisper small truths disguised as comfort. "What you lose returns differently. What dies teaches the soil to breathe." Those who listened went home lighter. Those who didn't still carried her voice inside their dreams. Over time, her temples faded again into myth, but her lessons embedded themselves in the heartbeat of life. The mothers who rocked their children, the farmers who tilled their fields, the artists who carved beauty from stone, all followed her pattern without knowing. Every act of care was another echo of her defiance. One night, beneath a sky thick with constellations, Zeus came to her once more. He descended quietly this time, no thunder, no glory, just a man in the shape of a god, standing beside the spring where she sat. For a long while, neither spoke. Then he said, "The stars tell stories of you." Rhea smiled. "The stars tell stories of everyone. They're just better listeners than gods." He looked into the water where their reflections blurred together. "I thought ending the Titan's rule would end fear, but even now, the world trembles." "It will always tremble," she said gently. "That's how it stays alive." He turned to her. "And when I am gone, you will return," she said simply. "As storm, as seed, as thought. Even gods must be reborn. We are all cycles wearing crowns." He absorbed her words in silence. Then, for the first time since the beginning of his reign, Zeus knelt, not in worship but in understanding. Rhea touched his head, a gesture both blessing and farewell. "Rule wisely," she whispered, "not as one who commands, but as one who remembers." When he rose, dawn had already begun to color the horizon. He looked back only once before ascending into the light. Rhea watched him go, her heart swelling with both pride and peace. Around her, the spring reflected the new sun. A bird sang nearby, repeating the same simple note again and again. She listened, realizing it was the perfect prayer, not for change but for continuity. She closed her eyes. In that moment, everything aligned, the mountain, the river, the heartbeat of the world, her own breath. The cycle turned once more, quiet, inevitable, complete, and the question drifted softly across eternity, unanswered but understood. When even gods return to the rhythm that bore them, what remains eternal, the creator or the act of creation itself. Twilight settled over the mountain like a breath being held. The sun slid beneath the horizon, leaving the sky painted in shades of fading gold and violet. For a moment, the world felt between states. Neither day nor night, life nor afterlife, creation nor decay. It was in this pause, this sacred in-between, that Rhea felt the cycle nearing its rest. The valleys below were empty of priests now. The temples that once trembled with hymns had grown over with ivy. Time had done what it always promised. It had forgotten names, softened edges, and buried monuments beneath quiet soil. Yet the air still remembered her. When the wind passed through the reeds, it whispered mother. Rhea sat by the same spring she had watched for centuries. The water still reflected her face, though it was softer now, less divine, more human. She had learned, at last, that eternity is not brightness without end, but a steady dimming that teaches gratitude for each flicker of light. From the path below came the sound of footsteps, slow, hesitant, mortal. A young woman emerged, wrapped in a cloak of worn wool, her hair tangled by travel. She carried a clay jar and a small torch. Her eyes widened as she saw the ancient figure by the spring. "Are you?" she began, but stopped as though afraid to speak the name. Rhea smiled gently. "You already know," she said. Her voice was soft but carried like music through the dusk. "Why have you come, child?" The woman knelt and set down the jar. "There is no temple left," she whispered. "The cities have forgotten. The priests speak new names. But I found this place in a dream, a cave with light that never dies. I came to make an offering." Rhea nodded. "Then offer it." The woman opened the jar. Inside was nothing but a handful of grain, a few drops of honey, and a single wilted flower. She placed them upon the ground with trembling hands. "It isn't much," she said, shame coloring her voice. "I have little left to give." The goddess reached out and touched the flower. It brightened faintly beneath her fingers, color returning as though it had only been sleeping. "You misunderstand," Rhea said. "The smallest act done with love weighs more than any golden altar." The woman looked up, tears gathering in her eyes. "Do you still hear us?" "Always," Rhea replied, "but only when you whisper. The louder the world grows, the quieter I must become to remain." They sat together as night deepened. The torch crackled softly, casting amber light across the stones. "Why do you stay here?" the woman asked. "The other gods dwell in the sky, in marble halls and shining stars. You could too." Rhea's gaze moved toward the dark horizon. "Because someone must remain close to the ground," she said. "Every cycle needs its anchor. I am the stillness that allows time to turn." She paused, watching the fire's reflection dance across the spring. "Do you know why mortals give offerings?" The woman shook her head. "It is not to feed us," Rhea said. "It is to remember themselves, to pause long enough to feel that they belong to something vast and patient. When you kneel, the world hears your heartbeat again." The woman listened, her breathing slowing. For the first time in years, she felt peace stretch through her chest like a sunrise. A breeze rose from the east, carrying with it the scent of olive and salt. The torch flickered. Rhea stood and looked down the mountain. "You are the last to bring an offering here," she said. "After tonight, the world will forget this place. That is as it should be." The woman's voice broke. "Then how will we remember you?" Rhea turned to her with a smile that shimmered like moonlight on still water. "By remembering each other. Every act of care is a temple. Every kindness is a hymn." She reached out and placed her hand over the woman's heart. "When you love, I breathe. When you forgive, I awaken. When you create, I am born again." Tears slipped down the woman's cheeks. She understood. The goddess before her was not asking for worship, only for continuity. As they stood there, the stars emerged one by one. Somewhere high above, thunder rolled softly, not in warning but in acknowledgement. Zeus, perhaps, watching, remembering the mother who had made him possible. Rhea looked toward the heavens and whispered, "Even kings return to the cradle." Then she turned back to the woman. "Go now. Carry this rhythm into the world. The flame is not mine to keep anymore." The woman nodded, lifted the torch, and began her descent. Each step cast light onto the path, illuminating the carvings of lions and drums, now half buried in moss. When she reached the valley, she looked back one last time. The mountaintop glowed faintly, as though lit from within. Alone again, Rhea sat beside the spring. The offering still rested on the stone, the flour, the honey, the grain. She gathered them into her hands and pressed them gently against her chest. A warmth bloomed outward, spreading into the ground, the air, the stars. The earth stirred. Seeds hidden for centuries cracked open beneath the soil. A grove of flowers began to rise along the mountain slope, glowing pale gold in the starlight. They would bloom only once a year, for one night, the anniversary of the world's first deception and its first mercy. Her final gift. She leaned back and closed her eyes. The spring murmured beside her. The mountain breathed beneath her. "So it turns again," she whispered, "and that is enough." When dawn came, the valley was silent. The torch had burned to ash. The flowers remained, swaying gently in the morning wind. Travelers who passed that way centuries later would speak of a strange peace there. A quiet so deep it made them weep without knowing why. Some called it holy, some called it memory, but Rhea was no longer a figure to be seen. She had become the stillness between raindrops, the hush after thunder, the soft weight of love that survives its own ending. And in that stillness, the cycle turned once more. Birth, decay, rebirth. Each a note in the endless song she had begun before gods had names. The morning came quietly. No thunder, no omen. Just light unfolding across the mountain in slow, patient ribbons. The grove that had grown from Rhea's final breath shimmered under dew. Bees drifted among the golden blossoms, and a faint hum filled the air. Neither song nor wind, but something between. It was as though the world itself were exhaling. At the heart of that grove, by the spring that had seen every era, the air still trembled with memory. If one listened closely, they could hear the faint rhythm of two heartbeats overlapping, the echo of a goddess, and the pulse of the earth she had become. Rhea was no longer visible. She had dissolved fully into her purpose. She was mountain, wind, soil, and silence. She was every pulse that tethered creation to itself. Yet consciousness lingered like an afterimage of light. In that weightless state, she observed the world she had helped shape. The gods above, the mortals below, the space between them held together by unseen care. For the first time since eternity began, she allowed herself to rest. Not out of weariness, but fulfillment. Far above, Olympus glittered under dawn. Zeus looked down upon the world and felt a stillness that was not his own. It was familiar, grounding, a calm that reminded him of arms he had long outgrown. The other gods noticed it too. The winds were gentler, the seas steadier, the fires less hungry. Hera, Demeter, Hestia, Poseidon, and Hades all paused in their immortal routines, sensing something invisible guiding their balance. None spoke it aloud, but they knew. The mother still watched not as a queen, but as the rhythm that held their order in place. Hestia knelt by her hearth and whispered a prayer, not of petition, but of thanks. The flames bowed in return. Demeter, tending the fields of Elysium, saw new shoots sprouting from soil that had never known spring. "She is near," she murmured. Even Hera, whose pride rarely softened, placed her hand on Zeus's shoulder and said, "Peace suits you better than thunder." He smiled faintly. "She taught me that." Below, among mortals, the legend of Rhea had already faded into a dozen names. Gaia, Kybele, Magna Mater, Terra, even Mary to some. Yet each was an echo of her rhythm. Temples rose where she had walked, each claiming to have found the true mother, though she had never been lost. What they worshipped in stone was only reflection. What they felt in their quietest moments, that was her essence. Artists painted her unknowingly. Poets invoked her without name. The lullabies sung to crying children carried her cadence. The prayers whispered over graves carried her gentleness. Humanity itself had become her temple, built of breath, bound by memory. Rhea's consciousness watched it all and smiled. The world had learned the lesson she had lived. That creation's truest power was not in conquest, but in continuity. In the deepest chamber of the hidden temples, a small flame still burned. It had been centuries since any mortal tended it, yet it never dimmed. The flame flickered, casting shadows that moved like figures telling stories. One moment showing a woman wrapping a stone in cloth, another revealing a child born from deception, another depicting thunder breaking the sky. Each image dissolved into the next, just as her life had dissolved into myth. And through the shifting light came her final realization. Divinity, she thought, is not a crown. It is a circle. To create is to destroy a little of oneself. To love is to surrender control. To let go is to become infinite. Every mother, mortal or divine, walks the same path. Giving, grieving, and giving again. Their stories differ, but the truth beneath them never changes. The world survives because someone chooses tenderness over fear. Rhea turned her gaze toward time itself. She saw its endless loops spiraling outward. Stars birthing stars, civilizations rising from ashes, children carrying echoes of forgotten gods in their laughter. Each age thought itself new, yet each repeated the first miracle, the courage to begin again. And woven through it all was her rhythm. Heartbeat, tide, sunrise, breath. The same rhythm that once lulled Olympus to sleep now guided galaxies. She had not merely outlasted time. She had become its mother. A soft rain began to fall over the grove. Each drop struck a leaf, then another, cascading down until it joined the spring below. In every drop, for an instant, Rhea saw a reflection of herself. Millions of faces, each unique, each hers. The mother of gods, the mother of storms, the mother of silence. She understood now that her story had never been about rebellion or vengeance. It was about preservation, the defiant tenderness that keeps creation alive despite its hunger for destruction. She had defied a prophecy not by violence, but by nurture, and that, she realized, was the oldest form of power. Her final thought was neither grand nor sorrowful. It was simple, like the pulse beneath her palm when she once held her child for the first time. The world will keep turning. That is all the prayer I ever needed. Elsewhere, a mortal child stirred in her sleep. The rain tapping against her window soothed her, though she did not know why. Her mother hummed an old tune passed down through generations. A lullaby about a goddess who once hid her child from time itself. The melody wove softly through the night, carrying the same rhythm that began before the first dawn. And in that moment, across the gulf between myth and memory, Rhea heard it. Her essence moved through the sound like a ripple across water. She smiled within the rain. The story was not ending. It was merely breathing again. As morning rose, the grove glowed faintly with new blossoms. They swayed gently in the breeze, each petal catching light like fragments of gold. Travelers passing by would stop and listen, sensing something sacred. They would not find temples or statues, but they would feel calm, as though the mountain itself were whispering, "You are part of something eternal." And in that whisper lived every truth Rhea had ever known. That love is cyclical. That silence is not absence. That creation is remembering to begin again. The mother of gods was gone, yet never absent. Forgotten, yet everywhere. Faded, yet immortal through every heartbeat that dared to endure. When the sun climbed to its height, a final question lingered on the wind. One no scripture could answer, yet every soul instinctively knew. When the gods sleep and time stands still, who dreams the world awake? The answer drifted through the mountain air like breath, soft and unending. The mother. And as the echoes of Rhea's story fade into quiet, may her rhythm remind you that even silence has its own heartbeat. Rest now, as she rests, between endings and beginnings, between memory and dream, until the next myth calls you home once more.